You said that
So
the
I was
Indian
like,
government
oh
said that?
shit. Yeah.
Oh my
So
God.
that came out yeah. So that came out 2 days ago. And then, there are all these crazy anti-China people in India on social media. So these loonies, they come on my timeline and they're like, "You're gonna be banned. You're gonna be banned." So I was like, so they apparently banned some people this morning. So I don't know if they're going to do it in a batch, but so far I'm okay.
When did that
It's just
happen? When did you get
unbelievable.
news of this?
So the news was came out 2 days ago. Then this morning, Musk, I mean Elon Musk, he tweeted about that, saying, "Hey, the Indian government has asked us to ban some people, and we're trying to find a compromise." And he said they have sent out notification to the people on the list. So far, I haven't gotten any notification.
Well, I tell you, I'm glad SL because that would be a travesty if we lost SL Kanthan within this information warfare propaganda that you speak so eloquently about in your two articles. We're going to talk about that some today. But I don't know if you noticed, but I started recording because sometimes you get interesting stuff before the actual episode starts. And so I know when we talk, it's always a long conversation. And I always feel like I learned something new. So that's the reason why I started recording because I hadn't heard of this. But that's scary at the same time. It kind of goes into what you're talking about in your article about this information warfare to control, and it's kind of a theme of the forum. We talk about this a lot. Episode 95. I don't know if y'all know, people who follow the forum very carefully know, but I interviewed Cynthia McKinney, and Cynthia McKinney,
Mm.
she
Oh,
was
yeah, yeah.
basically kicked out of the United States because of her stances against the war machine, and she called out Donald Rumsfeld in the Bush administration, and she's been in Bangladesh for years now. She's actually in Bangladesh. She's in Dhaka right now, and she teaches at North South
Oh,
University.
wow. Okay. That I did not know.
Yes. And so they basically, she was like, I guess she was like, fuck it, I'm leaving the country. I'm not coming back to the United States. But she comes back to the States. But it's crazy how when you really speak out against the system, they would find ways to either get rid of you, like as far as take you off the earth, or they'll take you off the internet or something. But luckily she's doing good. And we had a 2 hour conversation a couple weeks ago, but we're going to get started now. If you're ready, I'm ready.
Sure.
Yes. So this beautiful people, welcome to another episode of Kiko's Free Thinkers Forum. We kind of got started ahead of time because S.L. Kanthan is one of the most popular guests on Kiko's Free Thinkers Forum. And there's more to say about that in a second. But this is going to be a wonderful episode 98. I'm confident of it. Believe it or not, we're almost at 100 episodes, people. This is a beautiful experience. I never imagined that we would get to 100 episodes. I didn't know what this thing was going to look like. I started it honestly because it's in memoriam really for my best friend. That's part of the reason why I started Kiko's Free Thinkers Forum. For people who don't know, my best friend passed in 2011, and I had always promised to him, Asa Williams, that I would start a platform in his memory. After he died, I was like, I got to do something, because we always talked about, having a conversational type of forum. And so this is it, Kiko's Free Thinkers Forum. We're welcomed by S.L. Kempton. Again, I believe this is the fifth appearance that you've made. And
Oh, wow.
he's a geopolitical analyst based out of Bangalore, India. And you all can go back to lots of his episodes before. I believe the first episode was 36, then 50, then 57, then 77. and this is now 98. So yes, this is your fifth time around, and I recommend people check out SL Kanthan's work. He has a lot of unbelievable work. He puts in a lot of time and effort, and a lot of insight into his writings. And so I think people should also follow him at his Sputnik India site as well, because that's where I find a lot of his writings. I think he does things on Medium, but you may be banned on Medium as far as what you're telling me now. You may not even be allowed to write on Medium anymore, but we may talk about that in a second. But I just wanted to say welcome to the show again, and we can't wait to have this beautiful conversation with you.
Thank you, Kiko. It's always a pleasure.
I tell you, SL, I always, and I don't want to do this just to brag because you're on the show with me right now, but probably more than a lot of guests, I really look forward to our talks because it's crazy. We met about, I guess, when was it exactly? About 10 months ago, our first encounter. And I didn't know where it would go as far as the relationship. I knew that we had a great first encounter, and we just, ever since then, it's like I've known you for a long time, and just the ideas that we exchange. We probably don't agree on every single thing, but our conversations are always respectful, and that's the point of the forum. It's about exchange of ideas and people coming together and people reconsidering, rethinking things, and not just taking everything in as like, okay, this is bad, this is good, this is bad, good, right, wrong. You have to process things and you have to talk to different types of people. And that's kind of the point of the forum. And SL has been one of my most consistent guests. He always makes time out of his busy schedule to come onto the show. We're a smaller platform, but we've grown a lot. We've reached pretty much every part of the world. We have an audience, international audience. 45% of my audience is outside of the United States. And so we have an international community forum here. And the goal is to reach 20,000 subscribers on YouTube by the end of 2024. And I believe that that's a realistic accomplishment. And with guests like S.L. Kanthan, Norm Finkelstein, Cynthia McKinney, we have so many people, Medea Benjamin. We've had all types of people, whether they're bigger platforms or smaller platforms, that have contributed to the show. And I just want to say thanks to all the guests, past, present, and future, and also the beautiful people who subscribe to Kiko's Free Thinkers Forum on our YouTube channel. I urge subscribe for free. It doesn't cost you a thing. It doesn't cost you a dime. Just a little bit of time to expand your mind, and you can't unthink free thought. So let's get started with the program, and because we have so much to cover today in the world of geopolitics. I just want to ask you, SL, because my audience has been asking a lot. Why don't you have your own podcast or your own, I guess, platform where you do videos on a regular basis? Would you like to answer that?
Say that again, please.
Why don't you have your own podcast? That's what a lot of my guests ask, and a lot of your followers, they ask, like, why don't you have your
Oh,
own podcast?
yeah. So I have a podcast. Actually, just the audio and just me speaking something or just reading the articles I wrote. So you can find that on Spotify, Apple, etc. And I can send you the link to that. But I should do that more often. And then on the YouTube, I have a video channel. And what I really wanted to do was do like maybe say 100 videos on geopolitics. Like as if it's like a course, like a college course. And so I just need a little bit more discipline. I did lesson number 1 and 2, and then I forgot about that. So thanks to your uh, the audience for reminding me. So well, I'm the busiest on Twitter, and so lately I've been doing some spaces, which is like you talk. I mean, well, it's just like you and me talking, and it's on various topics. And I do what you do. So I'm the host, and I bring in people who live in China, who live in Germany, like basically like unique perspectives. And especially, I like to bring, so I'm doing a thing called the Real China series, where I've been talking to the Americans and French and Mexicans and British, etc., who have been living in China for like 15, 20 years, you know? So, because if you look at social media, people say crazy things about China. I mean, like, you can say the most ridiculous thing about China, social credit score and the CCP controls every aspect of your life. There's no freedom and everything falls apart. Tofu drags and nothing works in China. Like the most stupidest and the weirdest conspiracy theories. So so for example, I brought this guy named Mitch Presnick. He lived in China for 30 years, you know, and he had like an uncle who came to him when he was 15 years old. And the uncle came and said, "Man, I just came back from China." So this is like the 1980s, and the uncle says, "Well, I just came back from China, and that's the future. And well, you should go sometime." So Mitch was like, "Okay, whatever." And then so Mitch goes to college, and in the last year of his college, the same the uncle comes back in China, you know, and this is like an all-American kid going to school in Michigan or something like that. So then he went to China in 1988, you know, and he was able to witness the Tiananmen Square and all of that. And he built a franchise of the Super 8 hotels in China. And he built 1,000 hotels. He 1,000 hotels, all like capitalism. So I had him on my spaces and he shared stories. So I'm doing stuff like that on Twitter. But I should expand. I should do more YouTube videos. But there's just so much everywhere. And so I've been facing a censorship by the US for the last 6, 7 months, you know. So I now have like 125,000 followers on Twitter, but I can see how the American deep state has like totally targeted me, So they keep like turning down my reach every day. It's unbelievable.
Absolutely. And to that point, I've noticed just from your first episode that you've done, and you always promote the work, when you come onto my show, and
So
that's greatly
uh,
appreciated.
will you think of breaking up, Kiko?
Yeah, you were breaking up some
So
too before. I don't know if it's because we kept saying the word China, but I noticed that a lot of the episodes when I'm not even joking, SL. When we mentioned China in a lot of these episodes, I believe I was talking to Radhika Desai, and I was talking to Radhika Desai about um, China, and every time China's mentioned, it seems like Zoom breaks up all of a sudden. It never fails. I can go to pretty much all my
oh my,
episodes where China is mentioned, and they're always bad connections for whatever reason. Like the people freeze. And there's one like where we froze 6 times, like Ben said, Agatfar, my friend in the United States, and we kept talking about Zoom in China. And every time he kept saying Zoom in China, it froze for like 5 seconds and then it would start up again. freeze again. And he's in California. It's like, why is the internet connection this bad? You know what I mean? And so I just don't know if there's a. I don't know if
By
there's.
the way,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, I mean, so this whole time, so your video is horrible. It freezes for like 5 seconds, and then it works for like a second, and then it freezes for 5 seconds.
Oh my gosh! But I've seen your face, and I've heard you pretty good. So that's what matters, as long as people can hear it, even if the screen isn't consistent. But that's crazy that that's happening. Maybe the conspiracy theory is not a conspiracy theory. Maybe it's just simply great thought process. But your first video has over 2,200 views, but after that it drops each time afterwards. And it's like, I think the fourth episode we did together when we talked about Hamas and Israel and everything, I think it only had like 300 and some views. And I think it's because of the YouTube algorithm, because all this is algorithmic. And so they're probably shadow banning you just like they're doing it to us. Any of the people who are thinking outside of the box, of course they're shadow banning our material. You know that they are.
Yeah, yeah. There was a guy Tucker Carlson just was interviewed a few days ago. So if you go to Twitter and you see Tucker Carlson, and so you can see the video from 2, 3 days ago, whatever, and it's mind blowing, And he talks about a multi-billion-dollar censorship complex. Okay, and it will involves, I mean, all of the government soup agencies, CIA, NSA, DHS, FBI, DNI, every damn soup, or I mean, the alphabet soup organization, and they work very closely with all the social media companies, you know, and so you should watch that. It's just like mind blowing, and they played a very, very key role in Biden getting elected in 2020. So he goes how they were able to shadow ban, censor, throttle tens of millions of social media posts,
Mm-hmm.
you know, and well, every week the FBI, the DNI, whatever, they would send a list of the accounts to ban to Facebook, Instagram, blah blah blah, and so all these social media companies also are filled with people from the government, you know,
Mm-hmm.
and then uh, the government also works with the universities. So these people, they call themselves the academics, but a guy from the State Department would go to Stanford University, and he would hire like 100 Stanford University staff, and then he calls himself an academic. And this team's whole job is, like you said, write algorithms to ban people, shadow ban people, disrupt the narratives. It's like freaking we live in the 1984 George Orwell's thing.
Yeah.
And he says, yeah, you know, and he says this started around 2012, 2013, you know. So, but 2013 was when Barack Obama, I mean, well, under Barack Obama, famous Smith-Mundt Act was repealed. So that act had been there since the 1940s to make sure that the U.S. government will not propagandize its own citizens. So that was removed after like 75 years or so, and it was removed. I mean, 65 years, whatever. So it was removed under Barack Obama, and then in 2014 when Russia went into uh, Crimea, and they had a referendum, and Crimea joined Russia. So that's when this team, they got like billions of dollars in funding to promote censorship, to control the narrative. And they work very closely with the European government, where you have the Atlantic Council, which is also funded by NATO. So my God, they're just like stifling speech. Every word is, this word is bad, that uh, phrase is bad. You cannot even say 2 plus 2 is 4, you know? And, like if you talk about the APAC lobby, then you get banned, shadow banned, censored. And if you use the word Jewish, oh my God, you're like totally dead. Okay.
And the
So
other N word
somebody,
too. And the N word, not the one about black people, but the N word about the people who were attacking the Jews. You can't say that word either.
hold on, I'm not getting that. Which N word?
Nazi.
Oh yeah. Well, I mean,
Yeah.
well, so it's like, so, but you can go and say, but Trump is a Nazi. Okay. So nobody will mind that. But if you point out to the fact that the Ukrainians are Nazis, and if you show a lot of proof, okay, then you're going to get throttled. You know,
Hmm.
so and then if you say the Nazis in Ukraine are collaborating with uh, uh, the Jews in Ukraine, oh my God, it's like another. So there are all these, so many crazy things, Uh, so, like, for example, somebody went into Chat GPT and they said, draw me a picture of a white person. Okay. I mean, there's nothing controversial in that, right? He didn't so he didn't say, show me a picture of a white nationalist or a Nazi or something. Like he just said that, draw me a picture of a white person. And then the AI program says, well, it may not be, uh, right. I cannot do that.
Oh,
So,
wow.
yeah, so yeah, I mean, there are just so many ways to like, so much thought control. And then if you talk about COVID, illegal immigration, uh, nationalism. I mean, they're
Election
just,
fraud.
oh my God, yeah. So the election fraud, if you just say election fraud, so if you're like an American citizen, and if you go on Facebook and say there is an election fraud, uh, so it's so funny. Like, but you can talk about election frauds in the U.S. Like, say, for example, in JFK's election. Okay, so if you go and say in 1960 JFK was elected because of the election fraud, nobody cares. Okay, but if you go and say in 2020 Biden got elected because of election fraud, then they go, "Oh my God!" So then you get banned, you get portrayed as uh, you know, uh, a threat to the U.S. government, like the most ridiculous censorship. It's like worse than the Soviet Union.
Oh yeah, I mean, and you can add anything January the 6th, any of this stuff, October the 7th, anything that goes against what they're telling you about that event. It's like hell breaks loose. But something you said earlier about the censorship, that audience, I guarantee you, we will talk about more specific stuff. But that's how SL and I are. We get to talking about so much stuff. But I believe the audience is gonna, is gonna resonate with the audience. But I was telling Tyler King, the family friend that joined the pod, I believe it was episode 8. And he was asking me, is censorship ever going to get? Is it going to improve? Is free speech going to get better? I said no, because Congress keeps passing more censorship, and it's a one party system. I mean, the blue team and the red team are the purple team. Blue and red equals purple, so they're the same team. I don't know why people argue about Dems and Republicans when they're the same people. I mean, 1996, the Telecommunications Act consolidated the radio channels, the Disneyfication of television networks. You basically have six major companies that own the information waves on your television, on your radio stations. And so you have this consolidation of power, bipartisan, quote unquote, bipartisan, the uniparty, red and the blue team, all agree on this. Isn't it interesting how they agree on so much, but yet they're so different? They agree on funding, genocides, and they agree on this and that. That's totally fine. But they're so different because these people love the black people, the trans people, the gay people, and these people love apparently the neo Nazis and the national. It's just ridiculous. I mean, if you cut and slice it, you start to realize they agree on a lot of stuff if you start to dissect them. And then the Patriot Act under George Bush, another surveillance overhaul that just, basically limited the freedoms of the people. Whatever freedoms we thought we had, I mean, it's just a way for the government to have more control over your life. And so, um, when people talk about authoritarianism, it doesn't just apply to the left or the right. It applies to it's based on consolidation of corporate power in the United States, which is one wing is the Democratic wing and one wing is the Republican wing, but it's the same animal. It's the same bird. You have to have two wings to fly the bird, and people need to look at it that way instead of all this blue, red, vote blue no matter who, vote red. It's just ridiculous. It's propaganda.
Yeah, totally. I mean, so you just have to look at who is funding these people. Okay, so you have like say, I mean, the Adelson family or the Koch brothers, billionaires fund the Republicans. Then you have George Soros and the other guy, Saibon, whatever. He funds the Democrats. Do you think the billionaires they hate each other? No, that's the billionaire class. Okay, so no two billionaires in the world have fought over stuff. Okay, but they work together. They are the swarm, as you might have heard from
Dr.
Dr.
Shiva.
Shiva.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so that's the billionaire class. Sometimes they may have a personality conflict, or in the old days, if you had a British billionaire, he may fight with the French billionaire. But those days are over now. Okay, now you have the globalist billionaire class, and they all go to the World Economic Forum, the what is it called, the Bilderberg, and all of that. The billionaires, and then you look at the corporations, whether it's a Goldman Sachs or Walmart, they fund both parties, you know,
Absolutely.
and and what they want is the money, power, and more power and more money and more control, and they let you fight over the social issues.
Mm-hmm.
The Republican may say there are only two genders. Then the liberal would say there are 15 genders, and then they eventually reach a compromise. So the liberal will say we should show porn to 5-year-olds, and then the conservative said no, you cannot show porn until the age of 14, and then they reach a compromise saying okay, we can show porn at the age of 8. Okay, wonderful. It's like it's like a win-win situation. you know there was this the video online. where this guy, he goes to San Diego or something. He goes to the city council and he reads a book from a library, from a school library. And it's like a porn. It's like so pornographic. And then they shut him down because it's so shocking to the city council members. They got, they turned off his mic. You know, so the guy goes, "Well, listen, this book is so horrible that I cannot read it to you, the adults. But you want 7, 8-year-old kids in public schools to have access to this book, right? It's like basic common sense, but it doesn't work. There's
Absolutely.
just so many, there's so many things wrong with this world, and we cannot, make a dent, and we cannot fix it because they keep censoring people.
And the funding aspect, follow the money. And that's why is what do you call the dictatorship? US people on all these political persuasions and sides who are basically part of the same thinking class of politics, whether they identify as left, right, middle, up, down, center, whatever, upside down, diagonal, whatever you want to identify as, whatever pronoun you want to use, whatever. It doesn't matter because it's the same thought process at the end of the day. If you're arguing over these kind of simplistic notions, then you're kind of playing into the deep state's hands because that's what they want you to do is to argue over these minute details and not the bigger picture. They don't want you to understand the bigger picture. They don't want you to embrace real diversity of thought. They want you to basically they want to typecast you like Hollywood does to its actors. They want to kind of keep you in a box. And so we have constant pressure to break away from those bonds and chains. But the issue is that dictatorship, is Putin a dictatorship? I don't know. Is the Putin presidency a dictatorship? Was Castro a dictator? If you look at a dictionary, if you look at Merriam-Webster's dictionary, maybe technically yes. But why don't you apply that to yourself? If you have Mitch McConnell, who's been in Congress for how long? Nancy Pelosi was in Congress for how long? They don't apply it to themselves. They lose sight of their own dictatorship. So you have one person in Putin, but you also have the same person in Congress here that's been there for 50 years or so. So what's the difference? And we know that the president here has no power, really. They're just a figurehead, really. The only thing that they are is the commander in chief. Other than that, they're really just there. They can't write bills. They can't pass anything. And the Congress has all the control. But we argue about who's going to get in office. When the strings are attached to anybody, it doesn't matter who's in. And just one further point before I pass it to SL, even if you're a Biden person and you love Biden, but you want him to not go to war, you think he's going to not go to war? That's part of his agenda is to go to war. I don't care if you call yourself a leftist. You're not. You may be a leftist, but he's not a leftist. He's not going to be following your principles because he's part of the war machine. That's a part of the society that we live in. That's the political system that we have, where you have to believe in war. You have to fund wars because that's how the system stays intact. So you can put whatever label you want to, but the person you're supporting doesn't agree with you. He doesn't share your principles. You want him to take away your student debt? He's not for that. He wants you to be in debt. He's not going to help you relieve you of your medical debt or your student debt or any debt. They want you to just be debt slaves. So all this left right stuff and Trump people come to me all the time. Okay, Julian Assange. He had every opportunity to get to free Assange or pardon Assange. He pardoned so many people, but he didn't pardon Assange. And why is that? It's not like he doesn't know who he is. At first he called him, oh, I don't trust him. He's not a trustworthy guy. And then they're like, well, what about Trump and what about COVID? Trump had every opportunity. He pushed the vaccines. But it's like you tell people this stuff, and it's like they don't see their own contradictions in their thought process. I don't care who you support, there's always a contradiction in your thought process, and we should try to find ways to not contradict ourselves. Everyone has flaws, but these people that we're supporting may not necessarily have the same interest that you have because other people have control of them, and they can only do so much when they're in there. So just think about that when you think about the president and all these debates back and forth, who's in, who's out. The deep state is always in control. And what do we do about that? I don't know.
Yeah, my God, you know, and like you said, uh, so yeah, so politics is so corrupt, and they all just have these pretend fights, you know, and then so like say, but let's take, like, what does it take for a human being to be happy, right? So the first thing is your basic needs should be met, like so you should be able to eat, and you should be able to have a shelter, and then the next thing is you should be able to buy a house, preferably, and then you should be healthy, so you should have access to healthy food. That should not be like a rocket science thing. Oh, only the top 1% can afford the good food. No, the good food should be affordable to everyone, and you need to be able to be mentally happy. You know, so if whole society is full of depressed people, then you cannot say that it's a problem with all those people. Then you have to focus on the society. What is the system that is making people so unhappy, right? So you need monetary stuff. You need a good job with a good wage. You need to be able to have housing, healthcare, and you should be able to get a good education, and uh, and you should be able to live in a safe environment where you're not getting robbed and mugged every other month. You know, so those are the basics, and your the infrastructure in the place where you live should be good, so you don't drive on a road full of potholes. That you have access to electricity, water, good the mobile phone, the internet access, right? So but these are all the basics. And if you look at the U.S. in 1970, let's say 1960, 1970, and then you compare that to now, right? So if you take a 1970, it's like about 75 years. Everything has gone worse for the Americans, right? So the middle class has really shrunk. They don't have a lot of money. And there was a chart that I tweeted a week ago where it shows that now the top 1% of the Americans have the same amount of wealth as the entire middle class combined, right? And just 40 years ago, the middle class had like 3 times as much wealth as the bottom 1%. I mean, the top 1%. Okay. So 30, 40 years ago, the middle class as a group were so much wealthier than the 1%, which would make sense, right? Because that would be like 60% of Americans have more wealth than uh, 1%. That seems natural. But now the same 1% have more wealth than the entire middle class of America. Okay, so that's one. So you're losing money. Okay, so how about health? Okay, so at least if you're very healthy, you should be happy. No, like you look at the obesity rate in 1980, which was 15%. 1 5. Now it's 45%, 3 times, and nobody is asking why. What are we doing wrong, right? And they still keep lying about the basic forms about nutrition. They tell you to eat more carbohydrate, and they tell you to stay away from fat, and they give you GMOs and processed food and bad fat and bad sugar. It's just horrendous, So they have destroyed your wealth, and so nobody has stable jobs anymore. Nobody gets a pension from their jobs, right? It's all like, no, screw you. You do your own 401k. Like people forget that. So I met an American old lady, okay, and she used to drive a bus, like a school bus or something like that, like state government or some bus, and she has a pension now, and she has bought a house with her the husband, and they get pension. Okay, but those days are gone. Okay, nobody, so you can go work at a bank, you can go work at the Facebook, you can work for whoever for like 40 years. You can be a loyal employee and you retire. But there's no freaking pension, right? So they have but taken away the money, and they have taken away the health. And then you look at the healthcare cost, right? 40, 50 years ago, the healthcare cost was very minimal, right? And now people are going bankrupt because they cannot afford things. And something basic, like say, like say, if a person has a diabetes and they have to buy, the insulin, you know, a lot of people, they cannot afford insulin now, because it's like $300 or something per month. Uh, but insulin was discovered like 100 years ago, so it should be like, 5 pennies per, shot of insulin. So, okay. And then what about the education? The Americans have $1.7 trillion of, student loan. And you go to China, the bad China, the communist evil China that is trying to take over the world. Okay, so you can go to the best university in the world. Okay, it's called Tsinghua University, and it ranks #1 in the world for computer science, for the electrical engineering, and a couple of other subjects. And it costs like maybe $2,000 a year. The best university. And like most people who graduate from Tsinghua have zero debt. They can either, they can just ask their parents, or they can just work in the summertime and just pay off. So you can graduate with the zero debt. Okay, and but they don't want Americans to know the good things about China. So they spread constantly, fake stories. Like just like but Tucker Carlson, he went to Moscow and he was blown away. But did you watch the video?
I've watched a little bit of it.
Yeah.
I've watched like small segments of it. I'm not a big Tucker person because I feel like he's one of those people like Dr. Shiva was talking about. Um, I think his agenda is almost like he's capturing as many people as he can, monetizing, capitalizing off as many people as he can. And I think when you do that like a Joe Rogan type, there's no end game.
Mm.
I don't see where people are becoming more anti-establishment as a result of Tucker Carlson. I think he's a fake anti-establishment because if it sticks, he's going to keep going with that line of thought. Because he used to be a neocon, but it's like, okay, people want to free Julian Assange. Well, shit, let's free Julian Assange. Oh, you for that? Okay, let's do that now. I think he's all about reading the pulse of the people when they're angry and taking advantage of that. I mean, if he is doing great things, good. If he's changing people's minds for the good, good. But I think he's a controlled opposition type. But to answer your question, I
Yeah,
have watched. I follow him enough to where I kind of understand like the interviews and stuff. Like I follow him, yeah, with caution.
yeah. So yeah. I mean, so he's probably fake. For one thing, so his dad so used to be aligned with the CIA propaganda. The dad was the director of uh, uh, what is it called? Free Europe or the Voice of America, whatever. So he was the director, and that was a CIA propaganda outlet. Uh, but anyways, this the one thing was, he was blown away by the Moscow subway station. you know they're so beautiful with like chandeliers and art, and it's so clean, and all the stations are, the trains are the 21st century. There are no drug dealers, drug addicts, no homeless people, no graffiti, no wackos. People are decent, well behaved, calm. you know and then he goes to the supermarket. He buys a whole bunch of stuff, with his team. And they go, I said, how much will this cost? There was like a lot of meat and stuff. And they all guessed, oh, like maybe around the $400. So they go to check out. It's like $100, you know? And that supermarket is better than the best supermarket in the US in terms of the looks and the cleanliness and so on. So same thing with China. There the infrastructure, the cost of living. Like this guy, he just posted his. You know, he's one guy, a single guy, living in a big city in China, and he posted his, bills. You know, so the water for 1 month is $3. Okay, water. And then I mean, the electricity was, if I remember, $7. Okay, and then he takes the metro to work, well, every day. Right, and like these are world class metro, Kiko. These are like freaking world class, like 2023 technology. Like super fast and smooth and frequent and beautiful. And you know but some of the subway trains have windows that are like basically with touch screen with TV. I mean, the monitor. Just like the display screen on your smartphone. The whole window in your subway train, it's like a display screen, so you can touch and get information. You know, it's like so freaking high tech. Okay, and so if you take that subway for a whole month to work, back and forth, okay, so it costs $15, 1 5. Okay, so just imagine like people in the U.S. Driving their car on the highway like every day to work, and they probably spend like $200 on gas, $400 on a monthly car payment, $200 on the insurance. So you're spending like $700, $800 on a car, and you have all the stress. And in China, like if you are in the right place, it's like $15 per month, for transportation. you know and then the mobile phone, like they have the fastest 5G, the most widespread 5G in the world, and it costs like $35 per month. And that includes the home internet. So the landline, $30 a month. Okay, So now, like John Stewart, he gave a speech. I don't know if you saw that. He's like such a
I saw
idiot.
something
He goes,
about you put a
yeah,
clown emoji next to.
yeah, so, yeah. So he goes, yeah, Russia has nice subways, China has nice things, but that's the price that we pay for freedom. What is that even supposed to mean? Why do you have to pay a price, such a horrible price for freedom?
Hmm.
It's like, okay, so the freedom is supposed to make America better, right? Because of the freedom, like you should have more innovation. Because of the freedom, there should be less corruption. Because of the democracy, the elections, the transparency, the freedom, the innovation, the capitalism, the USA should be much better looking than China. Okay,
Hmm.
so the USA should be much better looking than Russia, so that the rest of the world will say, this is why we want to follow America. See,
Hmm.
because their freedom and democracy pays off, and the American roads are amazing. The American people are wealthy. The American, people are so skinny and healthy, and the American people have so much money in the bank. Oh my God, what an amazing system! And but everybody, in China, the home ownership is like 90%, right? It's but 90. What is the home ownership rate in the U.S.? Like 60,
Oh,
you
I
know?
don't even think it's that
So,
high. Oh no, I don't think it's that high.
my God, yeah. So, you know, um, so the elites of the U.S. have been screwing Americans, and they're doing horrible things all over the world. They're starting a World War III in Ukraine against Russia. They're trying to start a World War III in the Middle East, and they are like already planning a World War III against China. I mean, what good are you doing? You know, so you
Hmm.
cannot make America great. You cannot make the world peaceful, and all you do is to spread conflicts, wars, and you know, but sit on your ass and say China bad, China evil, Russia bad, Russia evil. Man, you could be friends with Russia, okay? So nobody stops you from, being friends with Russia. So Russia never said we want to be like an enemy of the U.S. You know,
Hmm.
since 1992, Russia tried very hard to be friends with the U.S. and Europe. You know, in
Hmm.
2001, so Putin went to Germany to the German parliament, and he spoke in fluent German language. So Putin speaks also German because he
Hmm.
lived in uh, East Germany or something like that. And it was such a wonderful speech. He's like, "Hey man, let's forget about the Cold War. This is the beginning of a new century. Let's be friends. Let's work together as one team, as one family of Europe. We want to be a part of Europe, you know." And what did they do? Nothing, they kept up the NATO expansion. They funded the Nazis in Ukraine. They set up bio labs with bio warfare weapons labs in Ukraine, and the goal was to create viruses that would attack only the Slavic ethnotype. You know, all kinds of horrible things. They wanted Ukraine to join NATO. And then they bombed the Middle East. And but look at what's happening in Gaza.
Hmm.
The whole world. So, like, if you look at the official the stance of the U.S. government is to support the two-state uh, solution. So go back to the 1967 borders, and you make a Palestine state out of West Bank and Gaza, and that's supported by like 90% of the world. You know,
Hmm.
uh, the Europeans, they support the two-state solution. The U.S. supports the two-state solution. China, Russia, India, Africa. Uh, Except for like a handful of small countries, everybody in the world wants a two-state solution, but it never happened. And instead, you lock up the people in Gaza, you bomb them. Like but Norman Finkelstein, who was the guest at your show, he's like an amazing person. He's a Jewish American. You know,
Hmm.
and he says that Israel is the most racist and fascist state in a long time. You know, so I think when he meant a long time, I think he went back to the 1930s, to Hitler era. You know, and there's another Jewish doctor, who has died. His name is Hajo Meir, and he goes, Zionists are the same as the Nazis. You know, they dehumanize people, they kill people without any remorse, and they have the same the concept as like the blood and soil, all those things. So, so the U.S. is not doing any good in the Middle East, and they're now changing the constitution of Japan uh, to get armed again. So the Japanese are buying hundreds and hundreds of the Tomahawk missiles, and they're buying a whole bunch of uh, fighter jets, the F-35s and stuff from the U.S., and they are building up their navy. So that's in preparation for a war with China. You know, so a war is very easy to start. Okay,
Hmm.
starting a war is like starting a bar fight. Okay, it's very easy, right? So you can go to a bar, and there is a man with his girlfriend, and but you can start a fight very easily. Okay, so you don't even have to touch the lady, right? So you sit but about 10 feet away, and you keep like staring at her, and then you lick your lips. Okay, what is going to happen? The guy will be like, "What F are you looking at my girlfriend for? What the hell are you licking your lips?" And then you start a fight, right? It's so easy, right? And uh, then you can pretend to be the innocent person. You can say, "I didn't do nothing. I was there minding my own business, and he's the aggressor," right? And the same thing happens with Russia. So the U.S. goes and spends billions of dollars, and they will acknowledge it openly. So they spend billions of dollars in Ukraine. They do the color revolution. They fund the Nazi groups, the neo-Nazi groups. They put their the puppet leaders in position. They start a civil war, and then they kill thousands and thousands of the ethnic Russians. They pass laws against Russian radio station, Russian books, Russian TV station, Russian language in the universities. So they just like totally do to the Russians what the Nazis did to the Jews. And then they go, why did Putin invade Ukraine, a sovereign nation?
Hmm.
Mad.
It's propaganda at its finest, and it's crazy. Without us even having to officially acknowledge the titles of your two articles, one is how America is destroying itself in the world order, and then propaganda and censorship, how America dominates information war. We pretty much talked about those, we've hit those topics within the course of this conversation. It seems casual, which it is, but at the same time, we're pretty much touching on some of the most important points that you make in the two articles that we, came on here to talk about, and there's some other stuff. But I want to make a clarification. You were right about the home ownership rate, which is 65.3%. But keep in mind, it's a rate. Now the question that my dad is probably the ultimate free thinker. He's actually going to be on episode 100. So so people know who the special guest is for episode 100 is actually my dad, the person who more or less influenced me as far as my political philosophies and just my thoughts about the world in general, and just like respect for human beings. A lot of that comes from my dad. But he said, even not, ask yourself, son, if you don't pay the property taxes, what do you think is going to happen to your house? So that the home ownership rate does not factor that into consideration. The rate also doesn't factor in, just because you're working towards buying a home doesn't mean that you own the home. And so it's simply a rate. That doesn't mean that the people actually have their home 100% paid off. So they use these terminologies to trick us. And so we got to keep that in mind. Yes, 65.3 sounds like a good percentage, but do those people actually own their homes 100%? You have to think about that kind of stuff. And it's the tricky language that economists use to fudge the figures, this Bidenomics shit. I mean, which is just, if you guys watch Jack Rasmus's episodes when he came onto the show, he debunks Bidenomics. I mean, it's really just a fudging the numbers. I mean, there's no way, I don't know how people buy this propaganda that he somehow helped black and brown people. First of all, who do you define as a brown person to even come to a stupid ass statistic in the first place to where Biden helped out these people economically? So who are you? Who's considered brown to you? Is Javier Milei brown? Even though he's from Argentina, is he Hispanic? So that means he's automatically brown because he's Hispanic, quote unquote. These stupid labels that we come up with. And like I said, you can justify any figure and draw any conclusion based on your little methodology or formula to meet your agenda if you word it the right way. So we have to be careful with the language that these people use, especially politicians, because they're going to always make it look like that they're benefiting the people, because they're selling you propaganda. I mean, it's simply propaganda, but do you buy the propaganda or do you not buy the propaganda? Everything the SL has talked about shows the propagandization of the United States of America. The fact that we can go to war just at the whim means that we don't respect our fellow human beings. We've convinced people that Russians are bad people. We've convinced people that Chinese people are inherently bad people. That's the only way you can go to war. I mean, these are people. We're dropping bombs on kids, men, women. It doesn't matter. That's a lack of respect. That's a lack of humanity. And a lot of it has racist tropes. I honestly believe this racism word, I believe racism is real, but I believe what's happened in the American propaganda landscape is that instead of us focusing on ourselves, we found a common enemy to not like. And that common enemy is someone that doesn't live in that geographic space, whether it's a Chinese person, a Russian person, a Pakistani person, whoever it is this hidden enemy. We don't have to talk about our problems here, all the poverty over here. Let's focus on other people. Let's blame our problems on other countries and other people. And that's racist in itself. At the very least, it's xenophobic. And a lot of this xenophobia is real. I mean, that's all it is xenophobia. All this anti-China stuff, anti-Russia. I had a friend, a well-intended friend. I'm not going to mention his name on here because we're good friends. But he said something. He basically implied, "Why don't we assassinate Putin?" And I'm saying to myself, So you're actually condoning that the idea of assassinating the head of state of another country. What would someone feel if they said, "Oh, let's assassinate one of our presidents"? I mean, that's crazy talk. I remember when I was a diehard liberal back in the early 2000s, people were saying like, "Oh, they should do that to George Bush." I didn't like George W. Bush, but I didn't want him to be assassinated. I mean, we have to really be careful with the words we use and stuff because at some point it's like, okay, this is straight up hate, and we have to be careful with the propaganda. But this country is in a lot of trouble. The war propaganda has been successful as a result of us dehumanizing people because that's the base. You other the other people, you tell them that they're lesser than you, and then you justify whatever atrocities you want to justify. And we've done it to the Palestinians. And who's going to be the next group? It's really sad the world that we live in right now.
Yeah, right. And I mean, so if you're like an American, okay, you should really ask yourself, when the fruck are we going to stop fighting? Okay, it's just one excuse after another. Do you not realize you're getting bamboozled? So you may think, so what do I have to lose? I'm safe in my home and all the wars are happening abroad. Okay, so let me tell you why that every American should speak out against the war. Okay, because the world is so sick of America. And you may say, well, I don't care. I am the biggest, greatest country. Who the hell cares about you, poor people? Well, here's why. There's something called de-dollarization that is happening. Okay, so the whole wealth and the power of the U.S. comes from the U.S. dollar, and that was made the king of the world in 1944. So, like during the height of the World War II, uh, the Europeans had no choice but to accept the diktats of the U.S. So that's how the dollar became the king of the world, right? And then something happened in the 1970s where, uh, 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 basically from 1944 until 1972, the dollar was backed by gold, okay? And then the US actually defaulted on that because they ran out of gold. So that should have been the death of the US dollar in 1972. But it got resuscitated by a deal with Saudi Arabia, who said, okay, we will sell oil for dollar. And in return, you give us the security and make sure we are the number one in the oil and we are number one in the Middle East. So that's called the petrodollar. Okay, so that lasted for about 45 years or so, 50 years, right? And now the world is moving away from the dollar, right? So the U.S. it placed the sanctions on Russia, and the U.S. it stole like 300, 400 billion dollars worth of Russia's foreign exchange, and it's backfiring now. Okay, the world is sick of the American, the empire. Okay, so not the American people, but the empire, the constant wars, the abuse of the dollar, the constant bullying, the constant propaganda, the constant pretension of spreading freedom and democracy. Nobody believes that. Okay, I mean, if you're like over the age of 5, you should not be talking about freedom and democracy. Okay, because it's not how the world works. So it's actually bad for the U.S. It's bad for you. Okay, so it's bad for you as the average American, because when the de-dollarization it happened, I mean, to a larger extent when, say, China, Russia, India, the Middle East, they're all using the local currencies or the Chinese yuan to do the trade. The value of the dollar is going to go down. Okay, so that means the interest rates will go up. So your the mortgage rates will be 10%, 15%. Like it happened in the 19. So if you go back to the 1970s and the 1980s, the interest rates in the U.S. were like through the roof, right? So if you go to a bank, it will cost you 20% to get a loan for the home. So uh, the entire the lifestyle of the U.S. will have a huge impact, a huge its power, right? So there's going to be a huge, the inflation, the cost of the imported goods will be very high. The government will be forced to cut spending. It will be forced to cut your Medicare, Medicaid, Social Security, and all of the other things that the government, spends on the hard cut. There'll be huge layoffs. So a lot of bad things will happen when the dollar loses its, status. And so if you look at the history of the reserve currency status, so you go back the last 500 years, you look at the Dutch, the French, the Spanish, the Portuguese, the British, five great empires. And uh, uh, each one of those empires had for a moment their currency as the world reserve currency, right? So, like in the 1500s, so if you had a Spanish coin, that worked all over the world, so that was like the reserve currency. And then in the 1600s, you had the Dutch, the Netherlands. They made the coins that was accepted as the world's trading currency, right? So that's a huge benefit. It's a huge privilege, but it's also very dangerous because people get used to that and they think it's going to last forever, right? But it's not, you know. So the war, it creates more. The enemies around the world for you. Okay, so rather than forcing Israel to make peace with Gaza, well, you are supplying bombs and missiles that Israel drops on the Palestinian women and children. And rather than forcing Ukraine to make peace with Russia, you take it so personally and you want to destroy Putin. Why? He is like all the way around the world. He is none of your business. And you go and destroy whole of Europe. You put the world on very close to nuclear war. But there is a concept called the doomsday clock. A whole bunch of foreign experts, geopolitical experts, so they have this doomsday clock, and it's now 100 seconds away from nuclear catastrophe.
Mm-hmm.
So we're living in a very dangerous world because the rulers of America, they cannot control themselves, right? And now they want already to plan a war with China. Oh, Taiwan, we got to protect Taiwan. Why do you have to protect Taiwan? What is Taiwan to you? But do you really care about? Okay, they didn't ship to all the Taiwanese, but let them come and live in the U.S. Okay, they are very smart, very smart people. It'll actually benefit you too. Okay, and the Chinese don't care. Okay, so Taiwan is a part of China. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
so a whole bunch of Chinese, who lost the Civil War in 1949, they called the U.S. They said, "Daddy, Daddy, we lost the Civil War. The communists are kicking our butt." Okay, and then the U.S. it basically helped these people, and they're like, "What do we do with these people? Okay, there's an island here. Let's put them there." You know, and the Chinese would have easily conquered with Taiwan, but the U.S. it sent a huge the aircraft carrier, and they told China, like, if you touch Taiwan, we're going to drop a nuclear bomb on you. Okay, and that's the whole reason in the 1950s that China didn't attack and take over China. Like, that's a family business. Okay, why are you poking your nose in family business? Okay, so, like, would you like that if China came to Texas and they supported the Texas independence, and then China gives them weapons, missiles, fighter jets, money, and they tell the rest of America, "Hey, we believe in freedom. Okay, it's all about freedom, and Texas wants freedom, they get freedom. So if you live in Tennessee, and if you say anything bad about Texas, we're going to bomb Tennessee.
Mm-hmm.
You'll be like, hey man, get the hell out of my business. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
it's my business, right? I mean, the U.S. had a civil war to unite the country, right? So why would you want to poke your nose into China's business? You know, the Chinese don't want you to do communism. Okay, they're not forcing you to read Mao's little red book. You know, uh, uh, they're not as so. In fact, the Chinese don't want America to follow the China model. Okay, because if the U.S. followed the China model, then you would have amazing subways, amazing roads, amazing healthcare, and very cheap college education, very cheap healthcare. So you'll spend $50 a month on healthcare if you will adopted the China model. So China doesn't really want you to be like them. They're like, okay, you do your crazy capitalist thing, you do your the predatory economy. We don't care. You know, so just to leave them alone. To leave Russia alone, to let Europe and Russia be friends, to promote peace, you know, to be known for, like, oh my God, I love America. Like, it fucking promotes peace everywhere, you know. Biden brought Russia and, sorry, 1 second.
No, you're good.
Oh, okay, sorry. I mean, I thought I left something on the stove. I'm like, oh my God. So, so be a promoter of peace, right? And if there is, the peace in the world, then the American government will have $1 trillion to spend on Americans. Okay, so, like, you will get free college, you will get a very cheap health care, you will get uh, good organic food, and people all over the world will love America. Okay, and you can even build a wall on the border to protect against illegal immigrants. Whatever you want to do, stop waging wars. It's very bad for the American economy, and it will be the number one reason for the death of the U.S. dollar. You know, so BRICS was just 5 countries, right? Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa. Last year, I mean, on January 1st this year, they had 5 more members. Okay, and that includes Saudi Arabia, right? The world's one of the top, the oil, the kingpin, and also the United Arab Emirates,
Mm.
UAE, plus uh, Iran. So you have the 3 most powerful Muslim countries, and with huge amounts of oil and natural gas, and a very, very strategic reason, I mean, the region, they just joined an alliance with Russia and China. Okay, so think about that. And this year, 30 more countries want to join BRICS.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, why? Because people are so sick of US empire's wars and bullying. So the US government, it does not represent the American people, you know. So like you talk to the American people, you know, but so there are some crazy people on social media, but but if you go talk to the average American, he she wants to have a peaceful relationship with everyone, you
Mm.
know. So they're pretty cool people. They don't have it, but they don't want to kill 100,000 Russians or 50 million Chinese or whatever. And they're like, hey man, it's cool, So let's all live together. So, uh, but if you're an American and you just uh, uh, leave the foreign policy in the hands of the elites, then you are going to suffer. Okay, so the elites won't suffer. Biden, the Google's CEO, the vice president of Facebook. Okay, so like, they all have millions of dollars of shares, stock. They'll be fine. Worst comes to worst, they will, they go to New Zealand, Australia, buy a huge mansion, and they will live. So it's the average American that has to really worry about what his or her life would look like 10, 15 years from now.
Just a clarification. The gold standard ended in 71 under Nixon, I believe. And did 6 countries join BRICS? What happened with Egypt, Ethiopia, and Argentina? Did one of those not join?
Yeah, I mean, the Argentina, because of the crazy guy Milei, who is like
Oh,
a puppet of Israel, puppet of America. So he withdrew. So he
wow.
basically withdrew the membership.
Unbelievable. And the fact, okay,
Yeah,
so we got so much going on. We're going to talk
unbelievable.
about Javier Milei. My libertarian friends, fasten your seatbelts. You might not like what we're about to say, but you guys have to wake out of your coma. Like honestly, I don't know what you guys see in Javier Milei. I had Spike Cohen on. He's been on 3 different times on the show. Spike's a good guy. He was the 2020 Libertarian vice presidential candidate, representing that ticket. Joe Jorgensen was the presidential candidate, representing the Libertarian Party in 2020. Um, he seemed skeptical at first about Milei, but he seems to be chiming in with the rest of the libertarians, thinking that this guy's like the second coming of Jesus or something. And I just, like I said, I'll leave it at that with Milei. We're going to talk about him in a second, and I'm pretty sure SL has views about Javier Milei. But I had a question. I wanted to go back to the multipolarity that you brought up because that was kind of my first conversation, episode 36. um, a two-part question. What is your perception of Jaishankar, who is the Minister of External Affairs in India? And did you watch the recent Munich Security Council with Blinken and all those people that were at the panel? What do you make of those comments that he made about multipolarity and BRICS?
Yeah, that's a good question. So Jaishankar, he said, "Hey, we want to be friends with everyone, you know." So well, India, it used to be have a non-alignment, and now it's all aligned. So we want to be aligned with everyone. And he said, if I have multiple options, then you should say that I'm a smart person. So you should not criticize me for having multiple options. So why do I have to choose between the US and Russia? I mean, I could be friends with both, and I could so pick and choose the things that work the best for me. You know, so this is the new the multipolar world because well, India is very very close to the U.S. So like if you look at uh, the Indian media, the think tanks, like they're all like 100% pro US. But even they understand that the world is going to be multipolar. We cannot just let the US dictate the foreign policies of the rest of the world. And we have business things to do. We are very dependent on Russia for the military. And well, India cannot afford to antagonize Russia either, because if we antagonize Russia, then Russia and China will become the allies, and that would be
Mm.
bad for India in this region, So just for that alone, so India has to be friends. But we have a long history, the Russians are very loyal friends. They don't backstab you. They don't will assassinate your leaders. They don't throw color revolutions. The Russians never demand like India should not be friends with the U.S. You know, so whatever India does, Russia doesn't say anything. You know, but the U.S. is like a very very jealous boyfriend. Okay, but the funny thing is that the U.S. has many girlfriends, right? So the U.S. has Europe as a girlfriend, India as a girlfriend, but then uh, the U.S. doesn't want India to have any other boyfriends.
That's so funny. That's an
So
unbelievable analogy. I love that analogy. Um, we're going to come back to the multipolar topic. It's kind of been the gist of what we've been describing. Is this struggle of the U.S. To just see coordination, cooperation amongst people who may not necessarily be a part of their clique or their alliance. It's just crazy how that is. It's almost like in high school, if you have a group of friends you're hanging out with, but you don't want other people to have a group of friends to hang out with. Like it's so anti-intellectual and really, like I said, it's dehumanizing to just basically want to control what other people are doing with their groups of friends. In this case, the BRICS countries should be able to do what they want to do, as far as like amongst themselves. And they're not going to agree with everything within that group, but at least they have an understanding of each other. But we always want to control other people's economies, other people's thought processes. We in the United States. And once you realize that, you start to think maybe I need to take a step back and realize that I am being propagandized because at the end of the day, do you see Chinese military bases in your backyard, Russian military bases in your backyard? But for some reason, the average American is okay with having over 800 military bases around the world spread out. But if the shoe was on the other foot, we'd be losing our shit over here if we saw tanks and people dropping bombs and testing missiles in our backyard, but we think that that's okay to do in other places. It just doesn't make any sense to me, just as a sensible human being. But I guess we've been programmed to think that that's totally acceptable to do.
Yeah. You know why? I don't understand why. Fix America. Okay, make America great. Okay. So in the 1930s, you built, I don't know, I mean, if it was the world's first, but like, you know, subway systems in New York City, like that was almost uh, non-existent in the rest of the world. And you built skyscrapers, like amazing skyscrapers in New York City, and the world looked up to America, and all the technology and all that. It made America great. Okay, I mean, and now you go to Shanghai. Okay, you land at the airport. You take the train that floats above the ground, Kiko. It's called a magnetically levitated train, and it flies, literally flies above the railway tracks at 450 kilometers per hour. Okay, and you go to the skyscrapers in Shanghai. They have the world's second tallest skyscraper, 632 meters, I believe. You know, why don't you have such nice things in the U.S. anymore, right? So fix America, and the U.S. ranked at the bottom in terms of the education. Like if you look at the rich countries of the world, the U.S. is at the very, very bottom. It's like number 32 or something. Nobody can read, nobody knows science, nobody knows math. So you're just like developing a nation of stupid people. Why? You have so much money, like uh, uh, the children of the U.S. should be the smartest people in the world because you have the most money, right? So, what good is money if you don't have health, if you don't have any bank balance? Like there was a statistic that said 60%, 60% of Americans, they live from paycheck to paycheck. Okay, so what good is it by saying we have the world's number one GDP? Yeah, but people are broke, they're fat, they're sick, they're stupid, and they are, you know, mentally unhappy. If you look at like uh, the rate of the antidepressants,
Mm-hmm.
the U.S. ranks number one in the world. Why? Like you should be the happiest people in the world, right? So be like an example for the world. Stop fucking bombing other countries, for God's sake. It's a request and it's a demand. Stop fucking bombing. Stop spreading wars.
But we're going to talk about the situation in Pakistan in a
I
second.
mean,
Uh huh. No, you had a thought. You were going to say
sorry,
something.
just what? Yeah. So just one last thought on that. So it's not like World War One or World War Two, where the U.S. went abroad and fought and dropped the bomb on Japan and it won. Okay, so we live in a brand new world where Russia has 6,000 nuclear weapons. China has like 400, 500. Okay, and they both have the hypersonic missiles, and they go at like I don't know 5 times, but 10 times the speed of sound. Nobody can stop it. Okay, you don't have the defense systems to stop those the missiles. Okay, so you know you cannot win war. Okay, because before Russia dies, Russia will drop 6,000 nuclear bombs on uh, like every city in America. Why do you want to kill each other? Why do you want to destroy the world? You know. So
Mm-hmm.
that was my last thought.
Before we talk about the situation in Pakistan, and you can probably enlighten the audience what's going on in Pakistan as far as the chaos um, that's going on right now, the uncertainty of like who's actually in power. But I wanted to go back to this Javier Milei situation in Argentina because this is honestly, I've been so in and out and caught up with just interviews and just work and everything else, working on different projects and stuff. That was news to my ears when you told me that Argentina pulled out of the BRICS membership of 2024, January the 1st, because it was supposed to be six. But now that, with the Malay presidency, that should be a red flag right there for a lot of my libertarian friends. But this is what I'm going to kind of preface this as. Ideology in itself is not necessarily a problem. The problem isn't ideology. The problem is when you become attached to your ideology and you don't see other points of view. That's the problem. And I don't know if you follow this person, but her name is Martha Bueno. Do you know who she is? I follow
No,
her on Twitter. She has good
I,
thoughts. Like she's a Cuban American, so she's probably one of those types, the Miami influence and like fuck, the communists in Cuba and all this. I don't know her backstory and her experience. So I'm not trying to target her as a person, but just her thought process, just for this one example, as far as some of my libertarian friends, they accuse people who are leftist or socialist or whatever. They use all these labels. And notice how me and you, we try to avoid those labels because they really don't mean anything at all. It's about producing results. If China is doing good things, why do we have to put a label on it and say, oh, because they're doing that, they're communist or they're socialist? And because they're doing this, they're this and that. To me, it's jealousy, it's envy, is what it sounds like to me, because you're so piled up in debt and you can't afford education in your country, but yet you're going to trash these people because everyone's able to get a good education and a health care. So what's wrong with that? Why does that have to be bad? Why is that a bad thing that people basic needs have been met? And then you link that to socialism, that's somehow a bad thing. But anyway, she was basically saying um, she describes herself as a libertarian, which is ridiculous because then she goes on to say, "I was going to endorse Vivek Ramaswamy." And I'm saying to myself, "You call yourself a fucking libertarian, and you're talking about endorsing Vivek Ramaswamy?" And then after that, she says, then someone says, "Oh, he's going to endorse Trump," and then she's like, "Oh, I'm cool with endorsing Trump." Trump is not a libertarian. Like seriously? And so it's hard to take these people seriously when you're already moving the goalposts. You say you're a libertarian, but yet the people that you're looking at aren't even libertarians. And then she says last week, I think, communists, I don't respect them at all because they're just bad people. Communists aren't people at the end of the day. I'm saying to myself, what is a communist? Like, is everything that you see as adversity, is that based on communism? Like, what is that? Is it based on what happened to you in Cuba, your family in Cuba? It's like people can't get out of their own mind because they associate something automatically. Oh, that's bad. He goes a leftist. Oh, that he's bad. There's no way he can understand my experience. And we got to stop doing that to people, calling people names and then saying that they can't change and they can't do this, they can't do that. And that's what I would tell my libertarian friends about Javier Milei. That should be a red flag. The fact that they pulled out of the BRICS membership, that's a red flag. But what do my friends do? They're libertarians who are hardcore libertarians. They give him a pass. Why should he get a pass for that? And then they talk about, oh well, that's cool or whatever. He may be a pro-Israel puppet, whatever. Oh, so you give him a pass on that too? So are you really a libertarian? Is he really a libertarian? You're saying that he's a libertarian. He's the first libertarian president in the world, but yet a libertarian in the United States can't even get 2% national support. But we're supposed to believe that he's an actual libertarian, the first one in modern history. It's just, And then I think it's honestly what you were saying earlier is this American exceptionalism is us applying our mindset to other countries. Argentina is not the United States. Argentina has its own history, complex history, and we're trying to apply what we want to another country. I understand that my libertarian friends want to see a libertarian in a higher power in office. That doesn't make him a libertarian because that's what you want. There's no proof that he's an actual libertarian so far. He's only been in office what, a little bit less than 3 months, and people are just praising him. Oh gosh, he's a libertarian example. He's a beacon of hope for libertarians. And I'm saying to myself, what has he actually done for you to get his support that quickly when he's already shown weaknesses? But it's like people are just turning a blind eye, like, okay, that's cool. Whatever. He's all up Israel's ass. The Israel lobby bought him out. Oh, that's cool. He pulled out of BRICS. That's fine. Oh, the inflation rate is just going out of the roof. That's okay. But he's a libertarian, right? I just think that it's funny how people do that kind of stuff to justify their own ideology. And so they trash other ideologies, but their ideology is the pure ideology. I think the problem is when you become attached to an ideology and you don't see the flaws in your own way of thinking. That's what I would say about it.
To the Javier Milei stuff.
Absolutely, yes. I guess my question for you would be, what was your first impression when you heard about Javier Milei? Because it wasn't like he wasn't in the public eye; he was already a public figure. But the way the media made it seem was like he was just all of a sudden he became the president. But what was your
Yeah.
first impression when you found out about this? And what's your overall impression of him? And what do you think is going to be the result of his presidency in Argentina?
Okay. So what he's doing is called the shock doctrine. Okay. So write down what I'm going to say, and then you will come back to me in 1 month and say, "Oh my God, SL, you're a freaking genius." Okay. Uh, but I'm not a genius. So this has been done before. What he is doing to Argentina was done to Chile in the 1970s, and it was done to Russia in the 1990s. So, what he's going to do in summary is going to destroy the economy first. Okay, so make the inflation go up to 500%, 1,000%, like with 2,000%. Okay, and it's going to destroy the economy. It's going to destroy the pension, and she's going to lay off mass number of people, and there will be huge suffering, and there will be like suicide rate skyrocketing, death, poverty, homelessness, and then at that point, he's going to open up Argentina to the financial overlords from the US and Israel and from Europe. Okay. And then people will be suffering so much, they'll be begging for foreign help. Right? And now these foreign corporations, BlackRock, whoever, are going to descend upon Argentina like vultures. And they're going to buy everything for like pennies on the dollar, like for 1 penny for $1,000, right? So they're going to buy the Argentinian media, they're going to buy the Argentinian banks, they're going to buy the Argentinian transportation, like the airline. They're going to buy the electricity. So it'll be called privatization reforms, and the IMF will totally applaud that. And but Argentina has a lot of lithium mines, and he's going to sell all those lithium mines to the likes of Tesla and whoever. And but Argentina is also very rich in the agriculture. So BlackRock they love, and the big corporations like say the Cargill, right, and the ADM, they're going to buy like tens of thousands of hectares of the best the corn. And but Argentina is very famous for its beef industry,
Mm-hmm.
and all that the beef industry will be bought by Western oligarchs and the European oligarchs, right? And then these people are suffering so much that they'll be willing to have a job, right? So then they'll be begging for a job, uh, below the minimum wage, right? And they will work very hard. They will be very obedient, right? And so like this is the corporate financial takeover of Argentina. So the same thing happened in Chile in the 1970s. There was a guy named Arbenz or somebody. He was a
Mm-hmm.
very, very popular socialist, leftist leader in Chile. And he was overthrown by the CIA. But it so happens it happened on September 11th. So I believe it was 1972 or 1973, September 11th. He was murdered, and he was replaced by Pinochet, who was a brutal dictator, who had with no opposition leaders, no election, no labor unions, uh, no. I mean, he brutally oppressed Chile for decades. But he was the darling of the West. He used to pose with the Queen of England. And
Mm-hmm.
then the same thing happened in Russia in the 1990s. And it was only Putin who saved Russia. So you look at what happens to Russia in the 1990s. The GDP fell by 40%. The suicide rates skyrocketed. Poverty, drug addiction, the alcohol addiction. The Russian, the military, they could not even run the tanks because they didn't have fuel. Okay, so this is Russia, a land with trillions of dollars of the oil reserves. They didn't have the refining capacity to make fuel for the tanks or for the jet fighters. So it was horrible in the 1990s. So the same thing will happen in with Argentina. But I think it will be short lived, like for maybe 1 year. And then when you're suffering so much, like if you have no money, you will, sell your car for like $500, you know? So that's what is going to happen.
Yes.
So it's
You
called
mentioned
the stop.
you mentioned
Sorry,
Jacobo Arbenz. Jacobo Arbenz was Guatemalan, but your point is taken because there was a CIA um with him, the whole basically like the COINTELPRO tactics that they used against a lot of the dissidents, ousting people out of power, who were democratically elected. Salvador Allende was the person who was killed
oh, I'm sorry. Oh my God,
under the
I'm so
Pinochet.
sorry.
No, but
Yeah,
I totally understand because I'm
yeah,
a Latin Americanist, and it's kind of my wheelhouse. But no, I totally understood what you were getting at for sure. But you can get this
yeah.
information. SL Rice, like I said, propaganda and censorship: how America dominates information war. This is on his Sputnik India column, and also how America is destroying itself in the world order. A lot of this stuff that we're talking about is based on those two articles in particular. So again, check out SL's work. He's written so much great information, and he's going to continue doing that as well. And just if you follow SL on X, formerly known as Twitter, it's a wealth of information. That's how I ran into SL, because I usually don't go on X because it's a very toxic environment. Like I said, you got people. It's just a screaming match. It seems all the time. And the one thing that attracted me to SL was that he takes in different points of view. If you follow his account, he follow people who are quote unquote communist, socialist, but then he follow people who are also pretty right wing, um, very right wing, capitalistic, and very much about the free enterprise, the free market. And that's totally fine. I do too. I follow a lot of different people on this particular platform here, Kiko's Free Thinkers Forum. We've had so many um, pro-capitalistic minds, libertarians. We've had socialists on the program as well. So I don't have an issue with anybody, and SL doesn't. And so that's what I like to see. I like to see people who are willing to take in different points of view, and not people who are stuck in their ideologies and don't believe that other people can change. I mean, we really got to stop doing that, because we're doing ourselves a disservice. It's the same thought process that got us into this mess in the first place. Because when you do that, you're basically painting everyone with a broad brush. Russians are bad. Chinese people are bad. Oh, so people who are leftists, they're bad. People who are capitalists, they're bad. We got to stop doing that kind of stuff to people. And the communists, when I was talking about Martha Bueno earlier, the same applies to people who did the people who she was referring to. I guess the communists. If people think that communism is just unbelievably beautiful and there's no flaw to it, then those people probably have a flawed thought process, because there's no ideology that's 100% good or bad. You just have to, you can't be married to it. And that goes to my love-minded friends and my right-minded friends, or people who are center-minded. A lot of these moderate people, you guys got to get off your high horse too. These people who are centrist and moderate-minded, that don't mean that you can't be stuck in your ideology. Because just because you say you're a centrist, that's an ideology. Whether you think is not, yes or no, it's an ideology. Centrism is an ideology. And if you think that you're this just all of a sudden this perfect person, you're not. There's a lot of flawed thought processes in your thought process. You just haven't thought about it hard enough. And so my whole thing, people ask me, Kiko, are you a communist, or you're a socialist, you're this or that? You call yourself a leftist. I can get along with anybody, despite my label that I put on myself and what other people call me. But at the end of the day, I can change, and I can work with just about anybody, and I can agree that war is bad. Can we all agree on that? Okay, then let's do something about that to avoid future wars. I don't give a damn if you're a right wing, left wing, up, down, left, right. We got to stop these stupid labels. We need to have principles together, and then going forward we can do something, and then we don't have to worry about the labels. We agree with a lot of stuff, but instead of doing that, we call each other names on X, and we block people on X because they don't share the exact same view. We call SL Kanthan a Putin puppet, a CCP puppet, and it's like, for what? It's like, are you not listening to what he's saying? I mean, there's a lot of value in what he's saying without all the name calling. It's just ridiculous. I don't understand it. But that is what keeps us from, forming those bridges of information to where we can take down the deep state. We're never going to take down the deep state if we got people, oh, I'm going to follow this vacuum, I'm going to follow this vacuum, and I'm not going to talk to these people. That's what they want us to do, is to be in our own rooms. They don't want us to talk to other rooms. They want us to be stuck in our room.
Yeah. It's like, like say, for example, a person grows up in a Baptist family, in the South. And there you cannot drink alcohol, like not even one drop. He cannot but dance, So then this kid, he goes to college, and then he goes to the other extreme. And then he becomes an alcoholic. He becomes a party animal. He's doing cocaine, meth, and then he destroys his life. You
Mhm.
know. So there is like the middle ground. So don't, so it's not like you have to be a communist or a libertarian or a person who believes in about 10 genders or a person who is like totally on the other side. So there's the middle ground. And like you said, sometimes, there are the good things in the far left and the far right. And even the so-called centrists can become a rigid ideology, you
Mhm.
know. So, for example, I've been watching the videos on Rumble, Odyssey, BitChute, and yeah, and there is this the documentary called Europa, you know, and so it gives a totally different perspectives to the World War II. So it's quite shocking. So you don't have to believe everything the documentary says, but but you start to understand that life is not so black and white. There are a lot of nuances. The history is written by the winners, and there's propaganda everywhere. You know, so like you said, but keep an open mind and learn from different people, from different sources. Read all sorts of crazy blogs, go watch all kinds of crazy documentaries on BitChute and Odyssey, and just will expand your mind because the mainstream has more lies than you would find in these crazy things. Okay, so like well, you could watch a documentary on the Kennedy assassination. Okay, so maybe it's 50% crazy, but then you look at the Warren Commission, okay, on JFK's assassination. That's like 90% bullshit. Okay, so the mainstream is just to control the masses. Okay, yeah, I mean it's just whatever the mainstream narratives. I mean, it has so many holes. It's full of bullshit. And that's why they have this multi-billion-dollar censorship uh, industry, because if somebody spoke the truth, they don't need to censor people, because you have the truth. You don't
Mhm.
need censorship. Like, say the earth is round and spherical. So you don't have to ban people who say the earth is flat. Okay, because so it's good. uh, because it's going to be a very very small the percentage of people, and anybody can figure out the actual truth. So the only time they use all this political correctness and all the censorship and ban is because their lives are literally falling apart. So more and more people are just waking up to the bullshit that surrounds it. And there's, bullshit all around us. On like every topic you could think of, there is so much mainstream bullshit. And that's the whole reason they have this all kinds of censorship.
And the mainstream, this is where the mainstream really gets people for a loop. The mainstream will give you the truth eventually, but they will delay it so long after you've already had the civil war against the people. That's what they do. They're just like, there was an article, I shit you not, SL. I was reading the local newspaper, and I think it was WKRN. or it may have been it may have come from a bigger news outlet, but I don't know if it was ABC, but it was a local affiliate that I read this article from that said that there was a multi-country study that showed that the vaccines were ineffective, but they published this stuff 3 years after the fact. But remember, when this was happening, you were a bad person if you didn't get the jab and any of this stuff. You couldn't question anything. You just had to take what the government told you to do. And now, 3 years later, now that some people only shot 25 or whatever, all of a sudden, oh my gosh, maybe there's some adverse effects to these shots. Oh, you don't say? But you say this 3 years later after people have had effects from the shots. They can't sue the pharmaceutical company because the pharmaceutical company tells you in the fine print, if something bad happens to you as a result of our product, you can't sue us. What kind of a deal is that? So it's just like that. People have to really be careful. And I had, like I said, I'm glad that I kept the friends that I did, because a lot of people didn't like it, because people asked me, one friend in particular was like, Kiko, did you get vaccinated? And I said, no. And we were out, dancing and stuff. And that friend was like, okay, that's all they said. And we left it at that. No judgment, anything like that. And that's the way it should have been. It's just like, if you decided to get the shot, whatever. I shouldn't be like, okay, you don't do that or you do that. It's your choice, right? And so it's like, instead of us doing that, it's like, no, you're a bad person. Um, because, conventional wisdom tells us what vaccine in history has been produced in less than a year, unless it was already planned out. I mean, so if you're telling me that you can produce a vaccine in less than a year and it can be effective, that's anti-science, because that's never been the case in history. So why all of a sudden are we supposed to believe that a product can be produced by three different companies, Johnson, Pfizer, all these other people, and they just magically they can produce it and it's totally safe in less than a year, when they still don't even have a flu vaccine? They don't even have a vaccine for the flu, but we're supposed to believe that this is like, oh, this is the magic potion. But people, they don't think for themselves and see if, and they made it political as hell, because, oh my gosh, Kiko, you think like that and you're supposed to be a leftist? You're not a leftist, you're a right winger now, because you have a different view on this particular topic. People just can't think for themselves. It's just like, I don't give a damn what label you put on me. I'm just thinking for myself. And you can call me whatever you want to call me, an anti-vaxxer. And I'm saying to myself, how does that make me an anti-vaxxer? Because I'm going in with precaution. But that's all it takes for the deep state to do. You're in this group if you don't do this. You're in this group if you do this. There's no room for, like, possibilities, other possibilities. You're either bad or good. You're black, you're white. You're anti-vax, you're vaxxer. I mean, it's so sad, but it's everything you've been saying in your articles. That's the power of propaganda.
Yeah. And like you said, one of the key things about the propaganda is to have very high censorship in the beginning, okay, in that stage that really matters, right? And then you can allow the truth after some time, because once people's minds have been uh, made, then they're not going to change. And then even if the truth comes out later on, they go, yeah, that was in the past, but now it's different, right? So like they, so if in 2001, late 2007 and 2002, well, if you were an American and you opposed the war on Iraq, and if you said the WMD claims were fake, the nuclear, that Saddam had a relationship with Al Qaeda was fake, Saddam was trying to get uh, the uranium from Niger. That was fake. And Saddam had biological weapons in fucking labs, driving around. I mean, what kind of stupidity is that? So, but you were not able to question any of those, right? And then you had Colin Powell with like vial of a laundry detergent, saying this could be the anthrax, right? Just like absurd lies, just absurd lies, right? But then nobody could say anything, right? Like not one New York Times, one senator, one congressman, one TV anchor could say that was bullshit. What kind of a presentation is that? So they could not say that, right? So they would, wait for like 7, 8 years, and then the people can talk about the WMD lie. You know, uh, but it doesn't stick. It doesn't hurt. So nobody went to jail for WMD lies. Nobody went to jail for killing millions of Iraqi children. And then I mean, it just goes out of the memory, and then they say the same lies about Putin. So they would say, "Oh yeah, Putin, he did a massacre in Bucha. Putin eats babies for breakfast. Whatever nonsensical stuff." And okay, now people don't say, "Well, hold on." Like these are the same people who lied about WMD, who lied about the chemical weapons in Syria. They lied about Gaddafi, saying that he was killing his own people, and all these lies, because just like you said, they only reveal the truth when the truth has no effect.
Hmm. Wow, that's a very conclusive statement. But it's very true what you're saying. That's exactly the situation. Once the truth has no effect, I've never heard it explained like that before, but that is some pretty powerful stuff. Let's go to the Pakistan situation for my audience that may not understand the deal with Pakistan. Um, what implications does this have immediately, especially with the neighboring countries like India, um, and some of the Asiatic countries? Before we even talk about the world, like what is going on in Pakistan right now, and what is exactly being disputed?
Okay, so Pakistan had okay. So the first thing is in the history of Pakistan, since 1947, no prime minister has served his full term. Okay,
Really?
without a yeah, it's just madness. Every single person who gets elected, he gets he faces a coup before the time is over. It's like it's very very dysfunctional. So that said, like Pakistan had a very very good smart guy, you know, uh, well, Imran Khan. So he used to be a sports athlete. Uh, a cricket player, and he was a national hero. He went into politics. He was a very smart guy who tried to have a multipolar view of the world. So he was friends with Russia, he was friends with China, who was doing some really amazing infrastructure work in Pakistan. He tried to be friends with the US and the West. His wife herself was British, she was a white British person. So he's a very cosmopolitan person, and but the U.S. They warned him. They said, "Don't be so close to Russia, and don't be so close to China." But they said, well, okay, so you could be a little bit close to China, but you should definitely not be close to Russia, you know. And he flew to Russia to meet with Putin. And on the day he was, I mean, at the very the hour that he was meeting with Putin, the U.S. Engineered a coup in a Pakistani parliament. Okay, so just imagine if like Biden is on a foreign trip and Russia manages a coup in the U.S. And then when Biden comes back, they send him to jail for 10, 15 years. So that's what has happened. It's, I mean, it's just unbelievable. And
A lot of my
also,
Trump friends
uh,
probably want Biden to be in jail.
so then the puppet government, the U.S. installed the puppet government, and they had 1 year to manipulate all the media, uh, the people's sentiment, and all of that. But regardless of all of that, his popularity was still so high. Okay, that's why they sent him to jail, and then they banned his party. Okay, so it's like they lock up the Biden, and then they ban the Democratic Party. Can you believe that? It's so crazy. So actually, that's what they're trying to do to Trump, right?
Hmm.
Yes, it's called the lawfare. So you find all kinds of crazy the excuses, and you find the corrupt judges who will throw the candidate in jail. So by the way, I mean, if that happens to Trump, I think it's going to lead to a civil war in the U.S. So then they had the election. So I guess now they have to figure out a compromise because nobody, won the solid majority. But the U.S. Puppet leaders, they seem to have formed a coalition. But one of the bad thing is that the new leaders, they had this really amazing. I mean, they broke off this amazing the infrastructure gas pipeline deal with Iran. Which is so dumb because Iran has a lot of natural gas, and they could have uh, those two countries they border each other. Iran and Pakistan. So Pakistan could have benefited immensely from cheap natural gas and cheap oil from Iran. So just like how the U.S. blew up the Nord Stream, so here they sabotage the pipeline plan even before it succeeded. So, but so Pakistan, I mean, well, I want Pakistan to be successful and prosperous, and I want eventually Pakistan to have good relations with India, and we could be friends, because it's so stupid. We've been fighting each other for like, you know, 75 years, and nobody benefits.
Absolutely. Just to clear something, since we've been thematically experiencing delayed truths, has the mainstream media admitted that the Nord Stream pipeline was blown up by the United States? Has that, or is it still like the Cy Hirsch broke the story? Has the mainstream media actually acknowledged that that happened, or is it still like let the people decide for themselves?
They will announce that in 2030. Okay, so in so in 2030 there'll be a blockbuster New York Times article. They'll be like, "Wow, guys, we just discovered these amazing documents from the CIA, which was leaked to Washington Post and the New York Times, and we are going to publish it. And for the bravery, we're going to award ourselves the Pulitzer Prize, and we are going to say how wonderful American media is."
Hmm.
Like we talked about, they will release the truth when the truth has no effect, because right now there's a war with Russia going on. No time for truth, guys. Okay, it's all going to be about propaganda, about how Putin killed Navalny so
Oh God.
amazingly. I mean, who the fuck believes that? Unbelievable. And so I mean, at the very moment when Navalny died, his wife happens to be at the Munich Security Conference. Okay, she's not a foreign minister. She's not a defense minister. She's not a president, prime minister. What the hell was she doing at the Munich Security Conference? You know, so she
Mm-mm.
probably poisoned. That's my guess. Like apparently she was there 1 or 2 days before he died, and she went to see him in the prison for the Valentine's Day on the 14th of February. And she gave him, I don't know, chocolates filled with poison, medicine. Honey, have something and please make sure you die tomorrow at 9 a.m. so I can be world famous.
She Jim Jones his ass with that Kool-Aid.
Uh,
She Jim Jones his ass with that Kool-Aid. The Jim Jones and Guyana with the
yeah.
Kool-Aid.
Yeah.
Some kind of a
I mean, who
cyanide
believes?
poisoning.
Yeah. Why would Putin kill Navalny? Like he's already in prison. He's no threat. He has like 1 to 2% popularity rating, and nobody cares about Navalny in Russia. Okay, the only people who cry about Navalny are the U.S. politicians.
The
It's just
West.
a way for them. Yeah, it's just it's all fake tears. Oh, we cry about the Muslims in China. We cry about Navalny. It's
But the
just
crazy thing,
something to.
but the crazy
Huh?
thing about Navalny is people, it's like I was telling a friend of mine on Facebook, you do realize that Navalny was a neo-Nazi, right? Like they completely ignore that fact that he was basically a fucking Russian nationalist like 15 years ago. Like he started a fascist party in Russia. It's like they
Yeah,
just oh, but that doesn't. It's okay. He's a good guy now. And then on top of that, the most the most shocking thing that I saw. I don't know if you noticed this, but Julian Assange's wife, Stella Assange, actually gave words of support for Navalny. And I'm just like, and
yeah. She's so.
Cornell fucking West. I'm sorry. I know I have a lot of listeners that they're like up Cornell West ass. Like, and I'm actually going to get some people on that are like sympathetic to Cornell West, but I'm going to be honest with you. Cornell West has been unimpressive. Um, I'm not a Cornell West fan. I've tried to get him on the show unsuccessfully. And that's going to be something that I want to conclude with. I want to conclude with that. And I have a few questions about Gaza that I want to ask you before we go, because we can always come back on at another time. But the Cornell West stuff, I don't understand the obsession with Cornell West. I believe he's compromised. He has too many ties to the deep state. He has too many ties to mainstream media. Why would he be in it to help people? I think he's pretty much at this point, he is an oppositional type of advantageous person for I don't know who he serves, but it's definitely not the people. People are comparing him to Martin Luther King. And I'm like, are you fucking kidding me? Like you're comparing someone like him to Martin Luther King? Like I just think it's far fetched. I don't know why people would think if he was really Martin Luther King, why would he still be alive? If he's Malcolm X, why would they want to keep him alive? If he had that kind of an effect on the people, I just and I have some good friends that are like, oh, Cornell West, and they're probably gonna be like, you're losing me, Kiko, because you're talking shit about Dr. West. You know what? I can say what I want to say because this is a free thinkers forum, And if Cornel West wants to come on my show, he has an open invitation. I've tried to invite him for 2 years, and I know some of his people know who I am. They know who I am. Norm Finkelstein is a good friend of Cornel West. And you know what? If Norm Finkelstein comes back on the show, I think he endorsed Cornel West. I'm going to ask him, why do you endorse Cornel West? I'm going to ask him. And so, like I said, I'm not trying to hide, and I don't know why his people are hiding. I don't know why Claudia de la Cruz is hiding. But it's like, and Jill Stein, I'm in communication with Jill Stein's camp right now. Jason Call said, we're going to consider coming on your show. So I give her respect for at least saying, we may consider coming on your show, but for you to be like, oh, I don't know who this Kiko guy is, I'm not going to respond to him. It's just been disingenuous because I know people know who even the smaller YouTubers are. They know who these people are. They're just choosing to, they're making the decision not to go on the platform. And that's fine. All you have to say is, you know what? I have too many bookings. I can't come on your show. And I'd be totally fine with it. But instead of them doing that, they have to pretend that they don't know who I am. And it's like, I know you know who I am. And that's totally fine because bigger accounts are following Kiko's Free Thinkers Forum. They're not going to follow my YouTube channel. They're not going to follow my X account. They're going to pretend that I don't exist, but they follow my content. And I know this because people are watching the show. And I've had Finkelstein on. I've had so many people on already. And so it's inevitable that they know who I am. But it's something that you said before the show, off camera, before we did this interview again. And you said something about a bureaucracy. And I was kind of surprised because you have a lot of followers on X. But you said something about you really didn't start like a big platform because there's so much bureaucracy in this space, in this so-called independent media. What were you referring to when you were saying that there's a bureaucracy when it comes to like independent media? Like you said something like that to me in a message.
Yeah. So I mean, so I don't know. Are you referring to like the? I mean, like the censorship. Our, our complex that we discussed, or something else.
I was kind of going more to you kind of implied when we were exchanging in the DMs in Twitter that there's a lot of red tape that you have to cross through in order. Is in other words, you almost have to get certain people's approval to be successful as a podcaster, to be successful as a YouTuber. They don't make it easy on you at all to kind of get your foot on the ground. They make it hard for you to get your foot on the ground. And it seemed like even for someone like yourself who has over 100,000 followers, that is not an easy thing to have a YouTube platform and to grow it for
Yeah,
whatever
yeah,
reason, whether it's logistics, whether it's technology or whatever, is not an easy process.
right, right. So you know, it's so. For example, so I mean, I started with zero followers on Twitter in 2022. And then by January 2023, I had like 5,000 followers, you know, and then it just skyrocketed, like so many famous people, they started to follow me. Like, I mean, I mean, Kim.com, Pepe Escobar, Scott Ritter,
Jimmy Dore.
Scott Ritter, yeah, Jimmy Dore, and Rania Kalak, uh, so many famous people, pretty much like Ben Norton. And I had like, I mean, the ambassadors from Cuba, Brazil, China.
That's
so, so
crazy.
many people. That's so crazy, right? So then I became the target of the U.S. Deep state, you know. So the first guy who started to like question me, and to uh, quote me, as a propagandist was, Gordon Chang, you know, the guy who wrote China is going to collapse like 24 years ago. So, so he started, attacking me on Twitter. I'm like, wow, that is so crazy. Then a general, okay, a former U.S. Military general. What's his name? He's also like Spalding, General Spalding,
Mm.
I believe. Yeah. So this guy, so I don't follow him. I have never went to his timeline. I have never talked about him. Nothing to do with him. So this fucking former military general of the United States of America, General Spalding, he starts to disagree with my tweets, randomly. Like, dude, what the fuck, So then this guy, Serpent Saw, he's the crazy anti-China guy with millions of followers on YouTube. He would just randomly come on my Twitter timeline, and he would disagree with me. Like if I post a nice photo of a library in China, he will get triggered. He'll be like, "Oh, China is so poor. Here is a photo of a crumbling building in China. Here is a homeless person in China. China is shitty. Everything falls apart in China." I'm like, man, why don't you stick to your YouTube? You have like millions of followers.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not bothering you, so I'm not coming to your YouTube channel, and I'm not trolling you saying you're a liar, China is rich. You can say whatever you want, like that's the whole, like, freedom of speech, so you say whatever you want, I say whatever I want. And if we disagree, let the people decide, So like I have my followers, you have your followers, so it's like, it's like the basic decency in social media. So then this guy, he started coming and trolling. And then my reach started to go down, So I used to, so when I had 30,000 followers, so I was getting with 2 million views a day, you know, on Twitter. Okay, now I have 125,000 followers.
Mm-hmm.
And then I did like an upgrade from a, regular account to a blue check premium to a premium plus. Okay, so well, you would think, so like if I was getting about 2 million views when I had 30,000 followers, and now I have 4 times the number of followers, and I'm paying premium plus, maybe I should get about 10, 15 million views a day, right?
Mm-hmm.
Well, guess what? Now I'm getting 1 million views a day.
Mm-hmm.
So my views are like, slashed by 90%. So like if I'm to get about 10 views, I'm getting a 1 view. So this is a massive censorship by the US deep state who sit in Washington, and they're so scared of this Indian guy in Bangalore. Unbelievable.
It's amazing what you said. And thank you so much, SL, for sharing that insight with the audience, because I think people need to know this stuff, because all of a sudden you become the bad guy when you're simply just trying to engage with people. And people have asked me, like, Kiko, why come you don't bring certain people on? And I'll tell you, SL, I've tried to get a lot more conservative minded people on, and I don't know what the reason is. I'll show them, this is, my YouTube channel, check it out. Um, and I shout out to Carol Swain. Um, Carol Swain published a book in 2022. I think it's called The Adversity of Diversity. It talks about the diversity. It's basically a critique of the diversity, equity, and inclusion, like all the affirmative action, all that stuff. she's a Black conservative woman. She actually lives in the same state that I do. She lives in Nashville. I live in the Nashville area too. And hopefully I can get her on the show later. But I reached out to her to come on the show to discuss things. And it wasn't that she didn't want to come on. It's just, it's a timing thing sometimes with some of these people, because this is an investment. I appreciate every guest that I've ever had and will have that's willing to come on the show, a smaller platform like mine, and talk about anything. That means a lot, because there's no money exchange or anything. We're simply sharing ideas with the people. It's like a public service forum. But when people are telling me like, Kiko, you're not trying to get a variety of people on, you have a certain type of person that you bring on, that's simply not true. I'm sending invitations to everybody. I've invited Trump on the show. I've invited Vivek Ramaswamy on the show. I can't control who says no and yes. All I can do is send the invitation, and I get a yes, no, and sometimes people hang it in suspension in limbo, and I never hear back from them. But it's like, you can't blame me for doing it. I'm trying to get all types of people on, but at the end of the day, we can only control so much with one person. And so people have to keep that in mind, that we're independent media for a reason. There's an uphill battle. And I want to stay independent. I will stay independent. I'm not going to take money from a third party to be like, okay, join. I've had people say basically, do you want to join our network? Nope. Because I know as soon as I join their network, they're going to make me want to change my content. And I'm not going to do that, because that's what's happened with a lot of independent media now. They get big and big and big, and then all of a sudden you start to see the changes in the content, and they start becoming affiliated with this person, and then it's like, oh, I don't like this person, or I don't like this person. That's why you should have just stayed independent to begin with. And it's like, we can still be friends, but it's like, I don't want to join your network. I don't want you to join my network. Why couldn't we just can't be independent and kind of, collaborate and stuff? Let's collaborate like SL and I do, and you can still do your thing and I can do my thing. We don't have to be a part of a group, because once that happens, that's when you start to see the changes happening. Because SL may not want to do something that I do, which is totally fine, because he's independent. I'm independent. But I wouldn't want SL to do something that, you know, that goes kind of against his views or his ideology. And that's totally respectable, because that's not the point. The point is to have an exchange of ideas and let the audience decide, do I agree with that? Do I not agree with it? But that's not what's happening. I've seen so many YouTubers and people who are so-called activists have 360 changes. They love the person 1 second, and then a year later they're hating on the same person that they had on the show. And you're not going to have that with me. I'm not going to be trashing the guest that I had on my show that was willing to come on my show now a year later, like, no, fuck that person. No, I'm not doing that. And because that's principles. We got to have principles. We can't be doing that kind of stuff. If somebody's willing to come on your platform, you shouldn't be trashing them 6 months later. To me, that means that something's not right. Something's not adding up. How do you go from like all positive and then all of a sudden that you're trashing the person that you invited on your show like a few months before? That doesn't make sense. To me, that means that there's a conflict of interest. And to me, that's the problem with independent media. That could be the danger of independent media. And that's why, honestly, I'm skeptical of people like Jimmy Dore. I've said this on my show. I'm not scared to say it. I've invited him on the show. I couldn't care less. If he wants to come on, great. If he doesn't, that's good too. But you have to also be careful. These people, when you have like millions of followers, you have to start to question, what is the agenda after that? Once you get to 2, 3, 4 million people, what's the agenda after that? Like, what's the goal? Like, what are you trying to do? Are you trying to bring people together, or are you just simply trying to grow as many people as you can at that point? Are you really independent at that point, or are you just another version of mainstream media? You're a mainstream version of independent media at that point. Because I know that there are people that follow you, huge accounts. You just tell me all those people that follow you, but they'll be like, "Oh gosh, I've never heard of SL Kanthan before," or they'll pretend that they don't know your content, that they don't follow your content, but they'll get information from your YouTube or from your Twitter account, and they won't even give you the credit. They'll pretend that it's like, "Oh, this is independent media." And that's honestly why I don't fuck with Jimmy Dore. Like, full disclosure, I'm not telling people don't follow Jimmy Dore. That's not what I'm saying. I'm just saying that I believe that Jimmy Dore, he has a production team, and at some point, he started out kind of a raw, like a smaller channel, but he's so big now, it's almost like I believe he takes bits and pieces from other people's channels and he kind of applies it to his own formula. And so I'm not telling people not to follow Jimmy Dore. I'm just saying be careful with these larger accounts because they may not be as independent as you think that they are. That's all I'm saying. I'm
Yeah.
not trying to trash
Yeah.
people. Just be skeptical. Take it with a grain of salt.
Yeah. Because say, so this is the drawback of success, right? So, like, say you have 10 million followers and you are making like 40, $50,000 a month. Okay. Would you risk that by saying something that could get your account banned? No,
Mhm.
right? So that money then traps the person. Okay, and then they have to be very, very careful, and they have to bite their tongue. They cannot say that the election was rigged. They cannot say anything about the transgender agenda. They cannot say anything about Israel. They cannot say anything about the APEC lobby, blah, blah, blah. And then you have all these, fences around you, and then you become a victim of the system. So you started out as a warrior, and then the more success you have, then you lose the warrior nature, and then you become just another brick in the wall, like Pink Floyd said.
Oh my gosh, yes, absolutely. I don't want to hold you up too much longer, Asa, because we've gone about 2.5 hours. But I had a burning question for you, and you may be the person to ask this to. Um, if I'm able to get Finkelstein back on the show, I don't know if I'm going to talk about Gaza because I think he's kind of exhausted talking about Gaza based on our latest communications. And so, we could probably go back and talk about Our Burn That Bridge when I get to it, which was his latest book that he published, which is episode 48. So if you guys want to go watch Norm Finkelstein's episode with me, episode 48, we talked about his book, Our Burn That Bridge, when I get to it, which is kind of a critique of this woke culture, this whole idea of wokeness. That's pretty much what he trashes. A lot of prominent Black academics, but he also trashes a lot of academics in general. Because remember, they kicked Finkelstein out of academia. They kicked Cindy McKinney out of Congress. So academia is just another system. And Finkelstein went against that system, and he suffered the consequences. And he trashed a lot of people in that book, but some of it's warranted, some of it, maybe I ask him more questions about it. But the point being is that these topics are topics, and at some point they can kind of expire. They can meet the expiration date, and I think some people have done that with COVID. I think the whole idea of being skeptical about the vaccines and the labs and everything else, I think that that's totally warranted. But at some point, are you going to talk about that for 25 years? Or are you going to talk about something besides that? It's like some people, all they talk about is like one topic. And I'm like, there's way more going on than that one topic. And so at some point, it's like, okay, what's going on here? Are you just going to talk about that one thing, or are you going to branch out and talk about other topics? And so we have to be careful with that kind of thought process. And so I liked when Norm published that book, because a lot of people just assume that Norm, all he talks about is Gaza, Palestine, Israel. But Norm has views on other things too, not just Gaza and Palestine and Israel. He has views on other topics, obviously. So I'm curious to hear some of his different, viewpoints. But the question I have for you was, what is the Middle East responsibility outside of Israel? Because Israel obviously has a position, and there's opposition in Israel against Netanyahu. But what is the responsibility of Saudi Arabia, the responsibility of Egypt, the responsibility of Qatar, Yemen, all these countries that have ties to Palestine in some kind of way, in a way, or they're allowing the genocide to happen? They're observers to it too. Saudi Arabia is. What is Saudi Arabia doing about this situation? They're still having relationships with Israel, and even when they tried to, I think they threatened to stop the oil supply in the region. The countries voted no. We can't do that. We can't cut off the oil. We can't do that to cause a ceasefire. But that was brought up, but it never happened. And my question is, why didn't that happen? And what is the responsibility of other Arab countries to help Palestine if you choose that position that Palestine needs to be protected?
Yeah, it's the U.S. and with Israel, they have basically bought, bribed, somehow compromised all these Arab leaders. So basically, the message is like, buddy, listen, okay, so you have billions of dollars. Okay, we will help you get rich with billions of dollars. What do you care about these little few million Palestinians? Don't worry about them. We may kill them, we may do ethnic cleansing, we will push them into Egypt, and maybe we will help the IMF forgive the debt for Egypt. So, don't worry about these, few million people. So that's uh, the arrogance of the ruling class of the U.S. and Israel. And then there are also some gas fields, natural gas fields, which are right on the coast of Gaza, which belongs to Palestinians. I'm sure Israel is promising a share of that to some of the leaders. Well, listen, we'll kick out the Palestinians, we'll steal all the natural gas, and we have these corporations, and we'll give you 5% share, things of that nature. But I don't think the world is going to accept that, because even if they get rid of the 2 million people in Gaza, what about the other 2 million in West Bank? You cannot do the same thing to them, because they don't have rockets, they don't have guns, they're just prisoners. And even if you kick out, so they're now threatening to bomb Rafah, so they've chopped Gaza in half, right? So the northern part of Israel has bombed for 4 months. So 1 million people in the north have now gone to the south. And now there is this city called Rafah, which is full of refugee camps and tents. And now, well, Israel is threatening to bomb, Rafah, in the hope that they will just all, like run further south into like Egypt, right? This is like massive ethnic cleansing. But a lot of countries are now starting to speak out. China is speaking out against this like every day. Brazil, Lula, he called it the Holocaust, and he basically compared Netanyahu to Hitler. And he said what Hitler did to Jews, Netanyahu is now doing to Palestinians.
Wow.
You know, yeah. So this happened like 2 3 days ago, and then South Africa. Oh, the country I love the most. South Africa. They took the case to the ICJ, the International Court of Justice, and they had a brilliant lawyer. Okay, so I don't know if you have seen South Africa's leaders. Like there is a foreign minister named Naledi Pandor. She's kind of a fat woman. Her face is not so pretty, but she's so brilliant, and you just fall in love with her when you start. She speaks with this like wonderful British accent, and she's so profound, thoughtful, intellectual. She's like an amazing person. So, and South Africa's lawyers, they did an amazing job at the ICJ. So the world is starting to rebel, but it's very, very disappointing what the Arab countries are doing. Bunch of cowards. So they're actually now like working with Israel to supply Israel with food, oil, find shortcuts around the Houthis. The Houthis are like big heroes. So like they're now attacking the American ships and the British ships as a warning to say we'll keep doing this until you stop bombing Gaza. And then there is the Hezbollah, who haven't really started the fight.
Mm-hmm.
So we don't know if they're just bullshitting or if they really have a lot of missiles and soldiers that can really damage the IDF, the Israeli military. So there are a lot of unknowns, and one would think the Muslim brothers, like where is the Muslim Brotherhood? All right by Saudi Arabia, UAE, Qatar, uh, all these multi-billionaires. They could really, I mean, like look at Turkey, which supplies 40% of the oil to Israel. They have pipelines like from Azerbaijan, it comes all the way to Turkey, and then from there to Israel. So, well, if Turkey wants, they can place a sanction on Israel and saying we're not going to supply oil, and that will wreck Israel's economy, and then they will make peace with Palestine. You know, so the most rational, logical, ethical, humane thing to do is to have a two-state solution. To create a Palestinian state based on the 1967 borders with Gaza and the West Bank. And then, well, you can have the UN army or even the US military to make sure that there are no Hamas rockets. So to make sure that it's a safe place. But that is the only proper solution. The rest is going to be wars, a lot of wars. Soon the US will be bombing Lebanon,
Mm.
Yemen, Syria, Iraq, Iran. It'll be a fucking disaster.
Wow. And see, Hezbollah was
Mm.
also, um, I feel like, because this is the thing about it, and I tried to bring this point up with my friend Ben Sedigatfor. Ben Sedigatfor, I think he's also been to Israel a lot. I actually went to high school. Ben Sedigatfor. He's a Jewish man. He's originally from Iran, and I met him in high school, and he lives in Los Angeles. Now he's been on the forum, I think, 3 different times. He's coming on again in a few weeks, and we kind of talked about what we left off with the fourth episode, episode 77, SL, about this idea of you have a let it happen on purpose theory about the Hamas and the Israeli government. Like maybe that was like already foresight from the Israeli government as far as like, okay, we're just going to let this most secure, one of the most secure places on earth, just let these people breach the crossing and just do all this stuff. And you proposed that theory the last time we talked, and it's interesting because Ben, I think he won't admit it, but I think he is more or less in the pro-Israeli camp in some ways, but he's also skeptical in the other ways about the whole Netanyahu government and everything else. We'll probably talk about it some more on here. So it kind of gets to the point that I was making before. I don't just invite people on who are more or less more sympathetic towards the Palestinian side because it's a complicated thing. It's not as simple as being pro this, pro that. I try to bring on different people because I try to get those people on who don't share those views with some of the pro-Palestinian protesters, and it's like they just won't come on to the show. I've tried to reach out to prominent professors and political scientists, but for whatever reason, I get no response. And like I said, it's not me trying to just have one viewpoint on the show. It's just simply the reaction that I'm getting when I'm sending the invitations out to people. I can't make these people come on if they don't want to come onto my show. But so for people who are saying you only have one type of person on the show, that's simply not true. I'm inviting different types of people on, but I'm only getting certain people to come onto the show, which is fine. But anyway, Ben was basically saying, how did this even happen on October the 7th? Like he's questioning, even if he's more or less familiar with the Israeli side, he was even saying himself, how did that even happen? Like this very secure space. Did the Israeli government allow that to happen? And so we really need to start asking those questions, even if you're not 100% sold on this idea of Hamas. We got to take out Hamas. I'm saying to myself, at what expense are you taking out Hamas? Like, what is Hamas? Do you define what that is? All these people are getting killed, and it's like the Hamas leadership is they're hidden in other Arab countries. And I'm saying to myself, is that the goal to take out a Hamas when most of Hamas's leadership isn't even in Palestine? And so you got to really ask those questions. I've tried to talk to people more or less that's oppositional to people like Norm Finkelstein. And I've tried to be like, okay, have you considered this point of view? Like, do you think that that's effective? This whole idea of attacking Hamas. Well, are you even defining what Hamas is? I mean, Hamas was democratically elected into um, the Palestinian territories, especially Gaza. I think it's the 2006 elections that were democratically held. I think Jimmy Carter was one of the observers. All this is documented in Norm Finkelstein's book, Gaza. An inquest in its martyrdom. I mean, it's all there if you want to see it. So it's not me trying to promote propaganda. It's simply the evidence was there. These people were democratically elected, chosen by the people. And then you have the PLO, the Palestinian Liberation Organization, Mahmoud Abbas, being the leader of that group. And that's more or less, the West Bank. And we've talked about this stuff. I mean, like SL said, you got another 2 million people in the West Bank. Why are we focusing on the Gazan people and not the West Bank people? It's just, it doesn't, none of this makes sense to people if you're trying to go through these different levels of information. If you're not trying to quote unquote take a side, it still doesn't make sense. Even if you're trying to be neutral about it, it just doesn't make sense. That doesn't, there's a power dynamic involved, and it's clear who is getting all the international support and the weaponry. And we're funding this stuff. The United States and these Western governments, we're funding these. We're allowing Netanyahu to be able to do this stuff. They're not able to do this stuff without the support of the United States and other Western governments. So we have to think on those terms as well. This is a larger part of the military-industrial complex. And even Ben agrees to that. Ben agrees that this is a conflict that's not meant to be solved. This is meant to be a perpetual thing. Gaza versus Israel, Palestine versus Israel. It happens like at clockwork. It seems like every 8, 9, 10 years, there's just something happens. It is not meant to be solved because it's part of the military industrial complex. It's just a wing, it's the Middle Eastern theater version of the military industrial complex. Then you got Ukraine, Russia, which is another part of the military industrial complex. We keep funding, we keep talking about Putin bad, but we're funding Ukraine to keep this shit going. We know that Ukraine cannot win. So why do we keep pumping money to Ukraine? For what reason? Who's getting that money? The Ukrainian people aren't getting it. It's just the Ukrainian oligarchs. They're getting the money. The military industrial complex is getting the money. The people in Ukraine, the innocent people in Ukraine are getting the money. So it's like, can you blame Putin at that point? Like, you blame Putin, but at the same time, it's like, are you not seeing this happening over here? And I'm trying to be neutral about it, but at some point, it's like, you can't be neutral about it. You just have to say, no, you motherfuckers are funding wars. That's what you're doing. And there's no end in sight. And so if there's no end in sight, what is the end game? You can't even agree to a ceasefire. To me, that's just completely inhumane. That at a basic level, you can't even agree to stop the fighting. It doesn't make any sense to me, and it shouldn't make sense to any outside observer.
Yeah, there was just this the UN Security Council vote a couple of days ago, and there are 15 members. 13 voted in favor of a ceasefire in Gaza. One state abstained, the UK, and one vetoed it. Okay, so guess who was the one country who vetoed the ceasefire? The
The
United
US.
States of America. Why? Why would you veto ceasefire? You fucking warmongers,
Mm-hmm.
unbelievable. Okay, and the people who voted in favor of the ceasefire, that included the U.S. allies like Japan, France, one more big ally. I think it was Germany. So no, South Korea. So Japan, South Korea, and France. Staunch allies of the U.S. They voted for ceasefire. And then the US said no, because the US is controlled by the APAC lobby, you know. So nobody wants to talk about it, but that's the truth. The US is totally controlled by Israel, you know. So it's, but in the long run, in the 1990s, the Israeli, the leadership was very pro-peace. The Oslo Accords in Norway, and then Yitzhak Rabin and Yasser Arafat, they came to the U.S. You know, so there's this famous photo of Bill Clinton, so letting them shake hands, and they got the Nobel Prize. And then the next year, uh, uh, the militant loonies in Israel, they murdered Rabin, uh, the Israeli prime minister who signed the deal. Then who came after that? Netanyahu. And then
Mm-hmm.
it's been downhill for Israel. So I mean, it's also bad for Israel. Because whatever Israel is doing is because of the power of the U.S. The American empire. But how long the empire is going to last? So not too long, maybe 10 years max, and then after that, the U.S. economy, its power is going to go down very rapidly. You know, and people are not really thinking it through.
Did you see? You mentioned that France also was one of the 13 nations.
Yeah.
And did you watch that interview with Macron where he, out of all people, Macron was struggling to justify the bombardment because it was an interview. He was visibly disturbed, like, and he was basically saying there's no justification for what Israel's doing right now. And this was after October 7th. And I was like, wow, he said that. And it's just like that's sad that a warmonger actually came to his senses, but the warmongers here can't come to their senses. It's really a sad situation. I don't understand it. I understand it, but it's just like it just shows you the state. People talk about spirituality and morality. This is a low point in the history of spirituality and morality, if I've ever seen one, because this is not a good sign for anyone. That there's like no kind of like heart. There's no humanity in that whatsoever. To not agree to this ceasefire is just. I'll just leave it to that, man. I can't even talk about it without getting emotional because it's not right. It's not right at all.
Yeah. So far, but 12,000 children have been murdered in Gaza. 12,000. Just imagine. That's like, so how many people died in the 9/11? About 2,000?
Yeah, I think they
Yeah.
said three
So,
thousand something
six,
like that.
yeah. So, six times that, and they're all children. And if you but look at the list, somebody made a video of all the names, the 12,000 children names. 500 of them had the age listed as zero. So that means they hadn't even reached their first birthday. 500, what do you call them? When they are less than 1 years old,
Infants,
toddlers or
infants.
yeah, okay, 500 infants. Okay, 0 years old, murdered, and you're going to call them terrorists? Sick, just sick. And the U.S. is making a lot of enemies for no reason, you know, and they think that the U.S. is going to stay number one forever. So just imagine if, like, say, 15 years from now, the U.S. economy collapses, and then the rest of the world, it starts the Nuremberg trial, and you see all these American generals and secretaries of state in a trial for war crimes and genocide. Do you want that? No.
SL, we are about 3 hours in, and so I just want to give you any
Oh
last words that you have. I know, right?
my.
We're almost at three
Thank you.
hours. And I just want to say thanks again. You don't have to do this with your time and consideration, just your expertise and your beautiful thoughts and your knowledge and your perspectives. We appreciate you at Kika's Rethinkers Forum. We're going to share all your information in the episode description. This was a wonderful episode 98. But I just want to give you a chance to acknowledge, like anyone, do you want to? And if you have any final words, and thanks again for coming on to the show.
Sure. Final words I would say is, love. Okay, just have some love. Stop being filled with hatred, paranoia, fear, anger, all these negative thoughts, you know. So if you're a Christian, you look at the Bible, and then the followers, they ask Jesus, Jesus, what is one message? You have given us so much stuff. What is one message? Then he said, love your neighbor as yourself. That's it. Okay. So the whole of the Christianity can be summarized in one sentence, in 4 words: love yourself as your neighbors. Okay, 5 words. Just 5 words. Love yourself as your neighbor. So, uh, don't fall for all the hysteria, hatred, spread by the ruling class. So you can love Russia, you can love Palestinians, you can love China, you can love North Korea, you can love Venezuela. Nobody's trying to harm the US, okay? Uh, uh, they have their own problems. The US has 7,000, 8,000 nuclear bombs. Nobody wants to bomb the US. Nobody wants to hurt the US. The US has a lot of soft power. I mean, I don't like the US propaganda, but I still watch the US movies on Netflix. Okay. So the US has a lot of soft power. Uh, so use that to become a better nation. Use that to become a loving nation. Spread more peace and spread more love.
Beautiful. And if an audience member wanted to contact you, what would be the easiest, most direct way to get in touch with you, SL?
So Twitter, so that would be Kanthan 2030. If they don't ban me, you can find me there. and, and if they ban me, find me on Substack and Medium. So hopefully I'll be there.
Oh, did they
Like,
reinstate your Medium?
so that was under a separate email account. So now I have another email account with Medium. Hopefully they don't know that.
Oh
Because I
God.
don't know, like the law. Because I don't know, like if there is a rule against using multiple emails, but we'll see. Crazy. I mean, I feel like I live in Soviet Union.
It's
I live in
insane.
India. I mean, I live in India, and my ass gets censored by the US. Why? You're so far away. Let me say something. So I'm not going to start a global revolution.
Mm. God forbid people come together from different places.
That's true.
But SL, I've taken enough of your time. Beautiful people, this is a wonderful episode 98. It will be released later today. Um, SL will probably have to get some sleep, but I'm sure once he's able to and stuff, he'll share it with his audience, and I'll share it with mine, and hopefully this video reaches a lot of people. I know it will, and I hope it impacts people in a positive way. But we really have to start loving each other more. I love that message that you left with. Um, Consider, like I said, follow his writings and his Twitter account. Also buy him a coffee or a beer, whatever he chooses. We're gonna put all those links into the description because I mean this is a lot of work that he puts in, and the same for me. I'm not asking for a dime, just a little bit of your time to expand your mind. Just give me a subscription for free on YouTube. That's where I'm at right now. I'm not asking for any of your money. If I get enough people, YouTube can start to pay me or whatever. You don't have to pay me anything. So I just that's all I say. If you like the content, consider subscribing for free. I mean, it's not costing you a thing to do that. And so we really need to support independent minded people. If we're really thinking about diverse minds and ideologies and diverse people, we need to show that we thank those people. And you may not have to give them money, but at least give them support, in other ways, if you don't have the money to give. So that's what I would leave at and just say, have a great day, beautiful people. And we'll talk soon. Cheers.
Thank you, Keiko. Bye.